Okay. Let's start with public comment. First is Linda Kraus.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Linda Kraus, and we have 2 children in the district. I'm grateful for the opportunity to discuss the future of advanced learning in our district. Through our tax dollars, the district recently paid for a review of our advanced learning programs, which is comprised of data from an expert in the field of advanced learners. This data from the report is important, but data alone isn't enough. It's how we use the data that truly matters. Today, I want to ask the district and the expert from Northwestern, who is here, how will the district implement a plan that translates this data into meaningful, effective action this school year and beyond for the student population identified as advanced learners? The review highlighted goals, which included adjusting programs and services as needed to align with evidence-based practices and stakeholder priorities, while also creating transparent and equitable policies and procedures. Per the report, 67% of parents in the elementary school and 56% of the intermediate and junior high parents said that they are not aware of advanced learning services in the district. Also on page 11 of the report, Northwestern stated that the most effective and inclusive programs work like MTSS, which provides tiers of intervention. Educators noted that the range of student achievement requires the need for more enrichment and acceleration than they feel prepared to provide in a regular classroom. When asked how well the district's advanced services meets the needs of their students, over 40% of the 85 educators that responded to the survey stated not at all. Classroom educators are interested in differentiation training and support for recognizing traits of advanced learners, but express concerns on how they can manage more expectations without some support or relief of other expectations. I've been asking the district to support my son's needs since 2020. I regularly come to board meetings to speak on this topic. I'm regularly told that my son's needs are being met by the administration. However, it's clear from this report that my son's needs and other children in district's needs will always be put on the back burner as indicated in this report. Many times before at these meetings, board members have said that they stay in their lane and that they can't comment because they are not experts. Our advanced learners do not have an expert that sits at this table except for today. As a member of the community with children in the district who require these services, I ask that you do your job today and ask the expert in the room all the questions that parents have been asking for the last several years. Ms. Henshaw, I'm asking you as an expert to advocate for the kids in this district when you speak today. Please tell the unique needs and issues that may occur when children do not receive the services they need. Please explain how many kids of diverse backgrounds, including twice exceptional children, are missed and the effects it has on them. Please help me understand why the task force includes administration and staff but no other stakeholders. Is this in line with your report in the PDF on dimensions of equity? Is there anyone in the district that is certified to lead a program like this? Is there somebody who is an expert in this field? Shouldn't we have Northwestern with 40 years of experience at the helm of this endeavor so that we are creating a truly evidence-based plan? How can we put this endeavor in the hands of people who are not clear on how to differentiate the advanced learners' needs today? Where's the communication and transparency that the report says is necessary to achieve success? As I've said many times before, this is not the teacher's fault nor the principal's. This is the job of the administration and the board's duty to ensure all children's needs in the district are being met. For anyone watching at home, please read the entire report and reach out to the school to demand that your children get the education they deserve.
Thank you. Next up, we do have a time limit of 3 minutes. There is clocks that we've added, so that please be respectful of that. Next up is Joy Kokolas.
Hi, school board. I'm Joy Kokolas, and I'm a mom to 4 kids in 3 different Mokena schools. First, I'm very excited to hear more about the next steps in this Advanced Learners Plan. Having an academically talented program will enrich the community as a whole, as well as our students. I am hopeful advanced learners will be implemented as soon as possible. It was encouraging to see the district move ahead so quickly with a special education program because now the community sees it is possible to have an advanced learners plan quickly as well. As for the special education program, it is so exciting to have our kids stay in their home school. This is absolutely wonderful. However, I'm concerned where the funding is sourced after the grant money is depleted. I'm concerned adding 2 additional admin positions when perhaps we should consider an additional Tier 1 section at the elementary levels. Please do not rush this decision. Also, the difference between timelines for special education program and advanced learners program is stark and well noted by stakeholders. Second, thank you to Mr. Andreessen, Mrs. McMillan, and Mrs. Ost on voting no to funding full health benefits for part-time bus drivers. By voting no, you showed forethought and respect for budgets and taxpayer dollars. I'm concerned this new benefit will be funded at the expense of our kids' education. Hiring and retaining CDL drivers is a decades-old dilemma, and I'm happy to chat about strategies we implemented in intermodal trucking. Lastly, I'm asking the board to rescind the $75 additional fee for 159 percussion students. Percussion students pay the $50 band fee and rent or buy their own sticks and drum kits. They use district-owned instruments at school and performances, but these instruments are not coming home with them. The onus of percussion maintenance should not be placed directly on a handful of percussion parents, especially as percussion as a section is integral to the ensemble. This feels punitive and it doesn't make sense. It was also very disheartening to see the district fund new programs and benefits and then turn around and disregard the music program, even after promising funding to make music on par with athletics. Why was this $75 fee even approved? Thank you for your service, for all your time and your consideration.
Joy. Next up is Aaron Min.
And Amanda Montgomery also gave her time to me. So I will be going more than 3 minutes today.
For noting that.
Thank you for having me. I'm Erin Min. Tonight I stand before you not only as a member of the community, but also as a parent of Mokena junior hires and an advocate for past and future students who have been offered limited advanced learning opportunities. Hopefully a chapter that's closing for 159. As a reminder, the district, with the board's blessing, set aside this whole school year, 24-25, for implementation planning and preparing with full implementation in the 25-26 school year. This includes scheduling, staffing, professional development, instructional materials, administration of additional assessments as recommended, and stakeholder communication. Instead, it appears that the plan is a task force. Questions for 159 admin and board. How are advanced learners being supported this school year? Why not face the facts spelled out in the independent research findings that back up the claims that families and teachers have made for years? Services for advanced learners are far from what they should and could be. Will you please get working in a reasonable time frame? Who is advocating for the current families? We could be doing so much better. Why stand in the way? Where is the consistency in supporting differentiated education from classroom to classroom and year to year? And by the way, all these questions are directly from the report. I decided not to put the page numbers, but the facts are the teachers and the students and the families, this is where it's all coming from. When has advanced learners teachers training been an option during in-service and similar days in the past year? Planned and set aside for the upcoming 24-25 school year. Only 35% of educators agreed or strongly agreed that they had adequate opportunities for professional development to meet the needs of advanced learners. Of these same educators who are supposed to currently be offering differentiated education, only 50% agreed that their role in providing services to advanced learners is clear to them. Dr. Johnson, what, if anything, have you prepared as an expansion for advanced learners for the 24-25 school year, as requested by families, the board, and teachers alike? A robust program for advanced learners, as advocated by families for as long as it's been discontinued, has been delayed or ignored over and over again. When will stakeholders in the community, as well as parents, be included in this process, as experts strongly encouraged? How many more families need to move from the district, age out, or start homeschooling before this is prioritized? Please do not use a change in superintendents as an excuse. Please do not repeat the dual language debacle, which the board and admin alike are responsible for letting it fall apart before killing it off. Day-to-day operations may be under the scope of administration, but the students and taxpayers are relying on the board to keep tabs on what is happening throughout the district, and this includes accountability, which has been sorely lacking for years. If the board needs to approve next steps tonight, I highly urge you to discuss those steps as well as alternatives. We were assured that our feedback would be recorded and considered, we meaning parents in the district, but the report focused on math and ELA, while the parent focus group, as well as students themselves, want more than math and more than ELA as options. Expanding to ELA and including younger grades were the minimum baby steps of supporting students' needs. For several years now, the only enrichment class students have been offered is math, and only at the junior high level. Not ELA, not science, nor social studies like Mokena 159 itself used to offer students starting in first grade. Those in the junior high math classes reported that their non-enrichment subjects often feel too slow and redundant. I wasn't sure if we could ask questions later on, so I'm asking questions now. I gave her a copy too for the Northwestern University Study Center for Talent Development. Our district's required to assure that students, regardless of gifted identification or designation, can receive instruction at the level of their readiness. Our advanced learning services designed to meet specific instructional and developmental needs. The benchmark to aim for in level of challenge in school is 50% about right and 50% sometimes too hard. At MIS and MJHS, 23% of students reported too easy. What steps are recommended to help subjects across the board be viewed as more challenging? What has a participation rate in focus groups for families than in other districts? Through what sort of communication channels did other districts provide information on parent focus groups? Where in the recommendation is the call for a task force? And then when can the public ask questions about the report? I look forward to a healthier future where every board member is engaged and aware of what's going on throughout the district and where advanced learners' needs are met. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Next thing is our presentation, Northwestern University Center for Talent Development. Actually, John, are you going to do an intro? Or? Oh, okay. Huh?
Dr. Johnson, would you mind doing kind of an introduction?
Oh, thank you. Okay, I just wanted to make sure he had it. All right. Good evening. Tonight we have Melissa Henshaw here from Northwestern University Center for Talent Development. Melissa was the consultant that was the main person who conducted the work with the study and report that you will be hearing about this evening. She's been a great partner in the process, and we appreciate their thoroughness, their objectivity, and their recommendations for us as we think about what our next steps are for a district. So I want to be able to turn that over so that you can share with us your presentation. Great. Thank you so much. As Dr. Johnson said, my name is Melissa Henshaw. I have been at the Center for Talent Development for about 6 years now. Prior to that, my work was in education assessment. I managed business here in the state of Illinois for NWEA. And then prior to that, I've been a district level administrator, a building administrator, a teacher, a consultant. I've done a little bit of everything.
starting my 36th year in education this fall. So been around for a little while and I've seen a lot of things. Also important to note that our team, there's a team approach to these reports. This is not a sole person review. We have multiple people on our team that conduct part of our focus groups, that look at survey data, that look at student achievement data, and that participate in sort of synthesizing and pulling together the recommendations that happen in the report today. So I do want to say before I start, this was an incredible experience to be here working with your stakeholders, your administration, your staff, your students, your parents. Everyone was absolutely lovely to work with. I was able to get in front of a lot of teachers and a lot of students, and I got a lot of great feedback from all of your stakeholders, and it's most appreciated in this process, and it's really helpful. And hopefully tonight we can just bring a little clarity to what the process looked like, what some of our themes are, and what some of those recommendations may look like moving forward. Thank you. You can go on to the next slide. I'm happy to, and I'm going to use my computer too, only because I'm not 25 anymore. Yeah, I'm going to be able to. Oh, great. So our goals for this evening is we're going to sort of share what this review process looked like from start to now, sort of what those first impressions and broad indicators are inside of the report. We're going to share sort of a summary of our priorities for action. And then Dr. Johnson at the end will sort of share out sort of what does a roadmap to create priorities look like across the course of the next year. So in this review process, we take a step back and we sit down and we talk with district leaders. We really want to understand why school districts are coming to us and what they want to learn and know through a review process like this. So when we engage in this, we really want to understand the range of learning needs that are inside of the district. What does that span and that scope look like? We want to understand the degree to which advanced learning students' needs are currently being met. We don't want to make assumptions that they are or they aren't. We want to gather that information and take a look at that. We want to assure that the district is engaged in equitable practices and services for all students. We want to understand stakeholder values and priorities around the value of advanced learner education. We want to adjust programs and services as needed so that they align with evidence-based practices, but also with stakeholder and district priorities. That's an important layer of this. And then we want to sort of set benchmarks for continuous improvement because the goal is always growth. It's always to continuously improve from where we are today. And then we also want to align our practices and our recommendations with your district's adopted strategic plan. The work that you're already doing is an important layer, an important filter in which we take a look at this process. Great. So our first steps were to meet with your leaders to understand their needs and sort of set some goals for this review. From that, we start with implementing in district surveys. We want to sort of take a wide look at what people's perceptions and beliefs are about what's happening around education in general, but also more specifically for your advanced learners in the school system. We pushed out surveys in this process to students, to families, and then to educators and administration. Then a second layer in that is to conduct some focus groups. Gathering the information from surveys is really helpful. What tends to happen in that process is themes emerge. And oftentimes focus groups give us an opportunity to delve a little bit deeper into things that rear its head or ask more specific questions about comments or perceptions that we're recognizing inside of surveys. We conducted many classroom observations in this process to get a better understanding of exactly what does this practice look like in action. We did a data and policy review. We took a look at all the policies that are public knowledge on the website to take a look at how do you address things like acceleration and early entrance to kindergarten and first grade, and then what does that range of learner needs look like inside of your data sets. And then once we have all of that, we start a synthesis of what are we seeing, what are we looking at, Does the data tell the same story that we were hearing inside of our surveys, inside of our focus groups? Are perceptions from educators, stakeholders similar to those of parents, or are we finding a disconnect there? And then based on those things, we make recommendations based on the range of needs that are here, the goals that you want to accomplish, your resources that are available to accomplish some of these things, and then how do we accomplish that over a specific timeline. Great. So our reporting process basically includes synthesizing all of the data, reporting out on participation. So you'll find those particular pieces of data both in the report, and I'm going to share those pieces tonight as well. We want to share relevant data that led us to the recommendations and the themes that we discovered inside of the review. Identify those things that we think are priorities for action, and then share recommendations based on the NAGC standards framework, and I'm going to share that out a little more specifically in a couple of slides later. But what I did include here is a table of contents that you see inside of the report so that you sort of understand the structure. When you first look at the report, it's very long and it's very voluminous and it's really dense. And so to look at it from just the overview here in the table of contents, we start with a summary of our findings. We report out all of those pieces that we gathered information around, and then we share out community priorities for action. And inside of those priorities, we make recommendations based on standards. That's what that looks like. So district engagement here in Mokena, we had 839 survey responses from students and 121 focus group participants for students. We were able to conduct those in person, so it was really a great experience to be in front of your students and just listen to what they had to say. We had 150 survey responses from parents and 13 focus group participants. We had 96 survey responses from educators and 92 focus group participants. And the educator group includes teachers, staff, and administration. In classroom observations, all in all, we conducted 33 different observations across all grade levels in all buildings. We saw sort of advanced learner programs, we saw regular education classrooms, and we were able to see some of your intervention time blocks as well. This is the framework that each one of our recommendations are tied to and aligned to. The National Association of Gifted Children is a leading organization in our country, and that organization engages in creating professional standards for serving advanced learners across the nation. They are industry standard and widely accepted in this country, and guide best practices for school systems. Standard 1 is focused around learning and development. Standard 2 is around assessment. Standard 3 is best practices in curriculum planning and instruction. Standard 4 is related to learning environments. Standard 5 is programming. And then Standard 6 is that professional learning piece. So as you look at recommendations in the report, each one of the recommendations is directly tied to the tenets in one of these standards. That's the framework that we work on. So general findings, what did we learn when we took a big wide look at what's going on here in Mokena? Overall, Mokena has an achievement profile that's slightly above average, meaning students here as a group are achieving higher than average or average populations of students. Okay? Both on FastBridge and on IAR, so we see that same trend on both of those assessments. Cohorts are demonstrating average or better growth in reading and math on IAR scores. So when we look at those state report card pieces, when we look at how students are performing, we're looking at their achievement, but we're also looking at movement and growth. The range of needs in ELA for students in the district are similar to those in math, and we report that out because we know that we currently have services earmarked for mathematics and we do not for ELA. But when we look at student learning needs and readinesses, those needs look similar. The range of math needs in elementary are similar to the range of math needs that we see at your junior high school. Assessment structures at the intermediate and middle school may be too limited to measure growth well, especially for your most advanced students. From request from the board, we are going to take a look at a couple of the data pieces in Appendix A. We'll look a little more specifically what that is, but when we think about assessment structures, we want to make sure that our assessments can measure what's happening at grade level, and that's where IAR is aligned, and that's mostly where Fastbridge is aligned. But we also want to be able to inform ourselves, what do our kids know above that grade level, and how do we take a look at that and diagnose that and really be able to measure if we have students who are ready for advancement or ready to learn above that designated grade level where they sit. There's a noted gap in performance between low-income students and their non-low-income peers. That is something that we look at in all school districts, especially through the lens of equity and access to advanced learning programs. We want to ensure that that's something that districts are thinking about. And so one of the slides from Appendix A will sort of demonstrate the discrepancy we see in achievement between students who are free and reduced lunch status and students who are not. We do know that Mokena uses a blend of in-classroom differentiation and enrichment along with math acceleration at the junior high to serve advanced learners here. Mokena leans on a flexible service model in the elementary school and a more well-defined pathway of acceleration and advancement in mathematics at junior high. And then service models may be missing some of our students who are also part of other special population subgroups inside of the district. We may be missing some students. With that said, I want to speak to the specific question from the school board just to go over sort of what are these indicators inside of that Appendix A. We felt like it was relevant to point out the discrepancies that we see in growth, especially from IAR to Fastbridge. If you look at the second column here, what we've highlighted in gray are growth percentiles at those grade levels. So if you back up 2 cells, we're seeing that fourth graders are growing at the 51st percentile here on IAR. Fifth graders are growing at the 49th percentile, but that growth metric shifts and changes when we get to junior high. Your junior high students are growing in the 78th percentile, which isn't typical. That's well above average. Between the 60th and 80th percentile would be considered high average growth on an assessment. So we see that trend both for 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade on IAR.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm trying to follow
Sure,
the
please.
data here, and I'm not.
Sure.
Can we-
Would it
can we-
help for me to show? Like, would it help for me to come over here and show you one more? Sure. Yeah. So here, these scores in this column are your mean scores, the average scores in this grade level on CLA tests on IAR. Illinois. These are how students are growing on moves from year to year. So when you look at how the fourth graders moved from third grade to fourth grade, those kids are growing in 51st percentile, about average. And similarly, the fifth graders are growing about average at the 49th percentile, right? What's not average is the growth rate of 57th grade. They're going from 70 to 77 which is well into the high average growth.
Okay, so that's the growth. Did you, just out of curiosity, at the
Yeah, so what we have access to, what this is not is our IAR, our scores from this year in 2024. Those were published at the same time this report was being published. So those aren't part of this data set, right? But I would encourage you to take a look to see if that trend continues.
Or
Last
it,
year.
and then before too, right? Is this a trend that has been always in existence?
Correct.
Okay, so then we can look at your part.
Yeah, that's coming.
Okay.
That's on the next slide. But then as you slide over to the far right side, what we have highlighted there is growth in those same areas in reading on Fastbridge. We're not seeing the same volume of growth for students on this assessment versus that one, which is why it makes us wonder if Fastbridge is telling us a true story about what's happening for students here at Mokena, right? So we wanted to point out that discrepancy in growth because we want to ensure that whatever we're using is telling us a true story about our students here.
And just for clarity, Fastbridge is something that the district is actually choosing And whereas IAR is at the state.
Correct. IAR is the state mandated proficiency assessment that starts at 3rd grade and runs through 8th grade and then also happens at 11th grade here in the state of Illinois. And students take that grade level aligned content test, and there are different levels of proficiency or better. 5 is that top level. So students who are scoring 5s are the ones we would want to investigate more in terms of how far above grade level might they be ready to learn. 4s are proficient, right? So, but growth on that assessment is a combination of how did you score the year before and how much difference do we see now, and what's typical for other students who also score that same way across the state of Illinois. So growth metrics are combined in that way.
Okay, so this is telling us 2465, this very first highlighted on the left-hand side. Is the conclusion here that the average 6th grader is at a 78, of our 6th grade class, is at a 78% growth on IAR in 2023?
Yeah, that the average growth in your school district on IAR for 6th grade, their students at the 70th percentile. They are growing at a better rate than 78% of kids across the state.
And that's our average. So there's people, there's, I don't know if this graph, if this is why I asked to go, looking for how many students, right? So like, how many students are at above whatever the guide, whatever the best practice is.
50th percentile would be average growth, right? Like that's 50th percentile is in the middle. So anything that gets well beyond that is overgrowth or is better than something that is less.
So there has to be a significant number of those kids to bring our average up to 78% when it's including everybody, right?
And the things like as a district, when we look at this data that we often go over with our staff members, there's 2 different types of percentiles that we're looking at. There's an achievement percentile, which we're typically looking at like how well are they achieving compared to their peers. And then there's a growth percentile, which is saying how well am I growing in comparison to my peers. So what Melissa is referencing is the growth percentile. This is not the achievement percentile that would tell us how many students are performing above grade level or below grade level. This is actually showing us that at the junior high, we are meeting the needs of our students and growing them higher than the typical average growth that takes place in the state of Illinois. So this is not an achievement percentile, which says like our average achievement is at the 78th percentile. This is actually showing the growth our students are making by comparing where I started last year to where I am today to the same starting point peers. So as a whole, our junior high is showing significantly above average growth in comparison to other students at the state of Illinois. That is not the achievement that we're typically used to talking about. Okay, that helps clarify.
Look at both.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so does this graph tell us both?
It does not.
Okay, so we lay side by side how many kids are growing at greater than 50% and achieving at greater than 50%. Is that the?
I feel like you want to look at everyone's achievement, whether they're at the 50th percentile or not. So where is everybody along the distribution, and then where are all of those kids growing? But this is an aggregate number. This is how everyone's growing as a group. I mean, an average.
Did you do any analysis on, like the quantity of students that in each grade that would warrant, enriched curriculum?
Sure. So there are there are many students here who are 4s on IAR. There are a less significant number of students who are 5s. So when we looked at those data sets, there were a few kids in each grade level that were performing at the 5 level, and there was a lot of students who were performing at that 4 level. So remember, 4 tells us proficient at grade level. We're not measuring above grade level on this particular test, so it's impossible for us to know. Right? But these are the data sets that we have, right? So we want to leverage what we have and find those places there.
I was under the assumption that the review would be, because if we're looking at, however, I mean, we need to know how many kids would be, candidates for this.
Well, sure, and I think your current numbers inside of your program sort of tell you the tale around what volume of students would likely qualify for that. What we're trying to show you here is what is the impact of what's currently happening for students inside of Mokena. Does that make sense?
So we didn't do that yet.
Yeah.
We haven't done that. That was not part of the review.
No, well, yeah, it is. I mean, we are seeing that students who are in your advanced programs are responding to instruction. Some of your students who are also not in advanced programs are responding to instruction. So there's a good fit in different places for different kids inside of your system. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So then when we switch over and we shift to mathematics, similar details here. What we've highlighted on the left side are those growth percentiles and IAR for math. And again, remembering anything from 60th to 80th percentile is in a high average growth range. So again, we're seeing students in mathematics at the state level, at that grade level aligned test, growing at better than average rates. And when we shift over and take a look at that on FastBridge, this is much more similar, right? It looks much more aligned than it looked on ELA, but we're still seeing not nearly the same growth for students. And we know that assessments like FastBridge have a much more limited number of questions and a lower ceiling. So it's really difficult to answer the question there, how many kids are really ready to work above grade level? It's difficult for us to tell from the data sets that we have. And then this is, and I know this is really difficult for people in the audience to see, but this is sort of that representation of difference in achievement and growth for students who are yes for free and reduced lunch and students who are no. And I feel like the places where we want to take a look is the first column for reading, where you can see students who are yes for free and reduced lunch have a much lower mean score on these assessments than students who are no's. And in some grade levels, the discrepancy is very wide, as many as 20 scale score points. This is also true when we look at achievement in mathematics. So we're finding that same discrepancy. The gray boxes on the top for students who are yeses are those places where we're seeing a difference in where the one group is higher, is performing higher than the other group only in those places. And we like to call that out.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Ms. Henshaw. What is the reason, I understand that, it's a checkpoint to see free and reduced lunch versus, is this something that the state looks at always for the free and reduced lunch, or what is the reason to focus on solely on this?
It's not necessarily that, but what we found in the review is that the volume of free and reduced lunch students who are qualifying for advanced programs is much less than the volume of free and reduced lunch students that you have in your district. And so in any advanced learner program, we want that to mimic the demographics of your school district. And so when we see that there's a discrepancy between who we're identifying and who's here, we always like to take a look at this, because the lower these performance scores are, and if these are the indicators we're using to qualify students for programming, these students are less likely to qualify because we know there's a noted gap in their performance.
Okay, so it does, but in your report, there was other demographics, is that the right word? That you specifically noted discrepancies from our enrollment versus, you'll get there maybe, or
Yeah.
this is in your report, I don't know if it's in the presentation.
Yeah, it's not in the presentation, but it is in the report. And what we're speaking to there is we want to look at the percentage of students who are on free and reduced lunch and see that that's mirrored in the students that we're identifying. We want to note the number of students who have IEPs and how many of those students are also identified for advanced learning services here. And then we also broke that down by racial barriers as well. And then there's also an EL category where we take a look at students who are identified as ELs in the district and how many of those students are included in advanced learner programs. And that is the data that you see inside of the report.
So what we're looking at in that Appendix A is only one slice of demographics that's contained in the report. In the report, we're looking at females versus males. We're looking at twice exceptional, special education, and then every race.
Yeah.
So is there this data on each of these?
Yeah, and we're reporting out the percentages of those too. So we know that at each one of those grade levels, and I have the report pulled up, but for example, a free and reduced lunch, we noticed a discrepancy in this year's current sixth graders, but we didn't see much of a discrepancy in your seventh graders or eighth graders, right? Those are just things for you to be mindful of and take a look at. What's of more concern is that you have a specific population of students with IEPs here, but no students with IEPs that have been identified for accelerated math. We know that we have a population of EL students here, but none of those students have been identified for accelerated mathematics. So we want you to think about those layers and those pieces.
Wouldn't those students have been identified as part of the process, as part of our process right now? Like with the fit, because we're reviewing FastBridge and IAR right now currently, right? So our students with IEPs, they're in data, aren't they? Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And part of the recommendations that you'll see is oftentimes when school districts only lean on quantitative data points for acceptance into advanced learner programs, we're going to miss students who don't show up the same way in those data points. So part of our recommendation is to really leverage your current MTSS process and look at students and multiple data points and multiple different strengths to determine what profile of student is the best fit for this service in lieu of relying only on test scores. Does that make sense?
I appreciate.
Of course, no,
We have more questions, but
I'm happy to.
while we're on the data, okay.
And so then that next level of this report has us looking at community priorities. What did we see where we feel like there are some places for movement? So definitely communicating a clear continuum of services for all students and procedures for inclusion in those services was one of the themes that we have. How do we ensure that our stakeholders know what our programs and services are, know how we're defining and finding students who are a good fit for those programs, knowing what timelines we're identifying students on. All of those pieces are important, both for our teachers and for our families to know in full transparency. And then how do we think about communicating those in a way that makes a lot of sense for everybody? Another priority for action was to sort of investigate the adoption of an assessment portfolio that is aligned to standards but has a ceiling high enough to accommodate your bank of advanced learners that we know are here. Looking at your FastBridge data, knowing that FastBridge is historically a great assessment, especially for younger students, but to really highlight if students are meeting grade level benchmarks on time, and there isn't a lot of context around what are they ready to learn above grade level, leads us to make a recommendation that we'd love to see you have a different assessment and interim that really raises the ceiling for all of your students so that we can better understand that range of advanced learner readiness beyond the grade levels where they see. That makes sense. And we want to ensure that there's a continuum of services that are aligned to the range of learning readiness that's here. We want to be really mindful of who's here. We want to be really mindful of what those students are ready to learn. And as we think about programming, how do we find best fit programs to serve those students? You'll also see in the next bullet point is sort of married to that one as well, to think about expanding the use of MTSS, which this district has done a lot of work on in your strategic plan over the last couple of years. So leverage all of that work that you've already done and apply those same processes and procedures to advanced learners, to define tiers, to define alignments, to refine student identifications, and think about identification profiles for students, and how do we think about tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 services, much like we think about services for students on the other end of the spectrum. And then thinking about providing accelerated learner pedagogy and methods, professional training and support for your staff. We have feedback around, yes, we want to understand who advanced learners are, but we also want to understand sort of what are those best practices in serving those students, and how do we provide support for educators in the classroom to be able to do that. And then from these priorities, those are where you see all of the different recommendations that are inside of the report. And you'll see that each one of them is married to one of the standards inside of the report, and the standards and those best practices guide our recommendations for action. I think it's also important to note that recommendations are exactly that. We gave a lot of recommendations for you to consider. Some might be a really good fit, some may not be a very good fit, some might be really feasible, some might be down the road types of pieces, but we wanted to make sure that we were giving a full range of options to consider if you're considering shifting some of your current practices to include some of our recommendations. That leads us to 24-25. So coming out of the summer, thinking about what happens now that we sort of know all of this and we can sit with it for a little while and digest what does all of this tell us and what does all of this mean and how does this impact our decision making moving forward. Convening a group to look at this in greater detail, to consider what recommendations make the most sense here. Do we need to dig a little bit deeper into some other student data sets to really understand the range of needs a little bit better? We happen to be in a current state of flux in the state of Illinois in terms of assessment. Our state Board of Education has adopted a new proficiency assessment at high school level, which will definitely have a trickle-down effect into K-8 school districts. And so watching that and understanding what decisions the state's making, so that if we choose to shift assessments, that we have the best alignment possible to tell the story of our students as they matriculate out of Mokena and into their high school system. We want to think about all of those things, because shifting an assessment is an enormous undertaking. I know this district knows about implementation and undertaking, because you've come out of a math implementation over the last couple of years. You're in the middle of a brand new ELA implementation, and one's coming this year at junior high school. Both of those are heavy impact types of initiatives on teachers. So is adopting a new assessment construct. And so that takes a lot of research and a lot of due diligence to determine which assessment, if we are thinking about moving, is a best fit for us here in our school system. A lot of moving parts with that. And I didn't know if Dr. Johnson wanted to sort of share at this point, but yeah, that's perfect. Of course, yeah.
I got a simple question.
Sure.
So this task force gets created in the fall, essentially now.
Yeah.
What is your and Northwestern's involvement with this task force,
Great
right?
question.
So the task force keeps going on, and they have questions on all these data sets,
Yeah.
helping them digest it. What's your guys' involvement?
Yeah, we're happy to be as involved as the district would like us to be. We've already sat down and sort of debriefed the entire report with your admin team. That's part of the service that we provide. We want to make sure that, your district understands what this report is. If and when we convene this task force, we would be glad to come and sit down and talk through what do these recommendations look like in action? What does this mean? What do typical timelines for this type of shift and implementation of a new service program look like? We're happy to do that kind of work We do a lot of professional learning with school systems. We design programs. So we can be as involved or, just a resource in the background. It really sort of depends on your engagement level.
That does shift a little bit into my recommendations as well, of like what that would look like internally. In having conversation, recommendation would be to involve Northwestern Center for Talent Development in our task force. They've conducted the study. They know the study. They know best practice. We have very talented educators, administrators that, will help provide input and what does this actually mean at the classroom level. But I think the guidance and continued guidance from Northwestern would serve us well to have them help first initially unpack this report with our task force to really understand what is this telling us, what are the recommendations, and then help provide us guidance. I'm going to give an example, and I know what this means, but it's just an example. So in here, there's some recommendations for cluster grouping. So as our task force makes decisions, we probably need some education as a group of what cluster grouping is. I would lean on the Center for Talent Development to provide us an overview of that so we can make the most informed decisions of what that could look like in our classrooms. So there's some knowledge building that our task force may need that I would also like to rely on the Center for Talent Development to support us in that knowledge building. So when we're making decisions, we understand fully what these recommendations entail so that we're making the most intentional decisions we can for our students.
Other questions?
I do have questions. Kelly, can I ask a couple? Inda, I don't want to step on your toes there. Thank you so much for the work and just everything that you have put into this and the staff and everyone around the table that's worked hard on developing this. It's been a long time coming. And one of the questions I have, and I liken it to the special services department, when you have a SPED classroom and you're in special education, you need certain certifications and things like that to be able to teach certain classes. Is there a corollary for advanced learning that teachers would need to be certified in a certain way? And second to that, have you identified through this process how many of our staff have the qualifications? And if not, that's certainly not, I'm not trying to be critical,
Sure.
But what's the timing of getting somebody prepared?
Sure, that's a great question. I think it depends on the level of services that you're going to provide for students. But currently in the state of Illinois, they've really backed off and moved away from gifted certification, gifted verification, requiring teachers who are teaching advanced learners to have that specifically. There are gifted master's degrees. There are certifications that exist outside of the state of Illinois, and many teachers engage that way. But our state does not require it because our state does not require that we serve advanced learners differently than other students. Advanced learner programs are not required in the state of Illinois. So with that said, there are professional learning opportunities for teachers to study advanced learner traits, pedagogy, understand assessment, understand above grade level assessment, understand best practices in the classroom, and how to provide rigor and depth and differentiation and tiered lessons in a way that makes a lot of sense that are also curriculum aligned. Takes time to build those capacities, but right now, because the state doesn't require it, there aren't a lot of teachers who, unless they're specific to gifted education, do they go down that road. How long does it take to ramp something like that up? It would depend. If you've earmarked your teachers who are going to teach advanced learner programs, it's probably best practice to put some sort of professional learning specifically for those teachers in place so that we're all on the same page in terms of what practices are most important here. What does our service model look like? How have we chosen to serve advanced learners here in Mokena? And then we're all speaking the same language as well when we talk about what is an advanced learner and what do those services look like. Because the state of Illinois doesn't require it, as many school districts as there are in this state, there's about that many different programs that exist in this state as well.
And Julie, I can speak a little bit too from my previous experience, not here, but in my previous district. Did have, multiple layers of support for advanced learners. So all teachers received professional development on differentiation because all teachers had students in their classrooms that had a wide variety of needs. But for teachers that specifically worked in programming that was specific to advanced learners who needed more, we did require teachers to take part in a course, not like a semester-long course, but there were some specific courses that we partnered with the university for, and they received an additional layer of professional development because they were providing an additional layer of service to their students. So I would imagine, once we're able to establish our programming model with our task force, that then I would rely on our teachers within our task force to help them determine what professional development do you need, teachers? And obviously we would have input in that as well to be able to provide whatever programming services that we identify as the best match here for our district. So once we can establish that programming model, then we can determine the support in terms of training and learning that our staff would need to be able to implement that. And that might look different from staff member to staff member, depending on their involvement in servicing these students.
Thank you. The goal of the question is to how to best prepare and budget for things, and certainly not trying to step on the toes because I had to look up what pedagogy was. So, hey,
Budget, because it really is going to determine on like what
Right,
does
we
our
don't
model
know.
look like,
Exactly.
and so
That's why.
when we the sooner we can get that defined, then we will be able to expand, I think, a lot more on the questions of budget, instructional materials,
Absolutely.
resources, training, all of those pieces. So that, to me, is one of our number one pieces of really thinking about the long term in terms of what that programming model will look like. So then we can start to begin to think about all those other aspects that will go into making that program come to life.
My next question is, well, I'll start with kind of a comment first, is the report and some of what came out of it reminds me of a report, I believe that was in 2015, that kind of had some similar findings. And I think one of the things that I'm curious about, when I go back to this chart that you went through, and I had written down, it's difficult to tell how many children would benefit from advanced learning when you look at this chart. So from day one, are there metrics, or that's not the word I'm looking for, but I think once I blurt out the rest of my thought, maybe you'll understand what I'm saying. Is there something we can do from day one to be looking at this issue, to be able to know or have a better understanding of how many kids would benefit beyond looking at these test scores? Are there things that the staff can be looking for that you can recommend so we can hit the ground running at least on that front?
There are, and chances are that your kids, when they come to you in kindergarten, you already have advanced learners baked into who's showing up here, right? And so how many students do we have in kindergarten that are meeting benchmarks early is a really good indicator of advanced learning potential. How many students are outperforming their peers on typical standard checklists or running records or any of those curriculum-based measures that already exist inside of your system? And then how do we find a way to measure above that? In early learning, it just depends on what resources that you possibly have here to measure those kids who are ready for that next thing ahead of their peers. When we get into more formal assessment and we can see percentile rankings and we can see discrepancies between average students here and kids who are beyond average here. And I say here because local norms matter. We know that overall your kids are performing slightly above average, above the 50th percentile. So average here isn't the 50th percentile. Average here is higher than that. So who here needs something different than the rest of their peers in order to be served in a way that meets their learning readiness. And there are a lot of ways we can diagnose that. If we're using robust curriculum pre-assessments that we currently have that are part of our mathematics curriculum or part of our ELA curriculum or part of our science and social studies curriculum, and we recognize that students are are showing us that they are proficient already or that they're mastering already content that's coming, then how do we wrestle with what does extension look like? What does enrichment look like? And then we ask the question, and if we're thinking about it through MTSS, if that student is always over ready and has already mastered a lot of the content in the classroom where they are, what's our next step in diagnosing what's the right placement for that student in our system, and how do we leverage that?
So, last question, I promise.
Sure, no, you're fine. Yeah.
Well, I promise for now.
Okay. Yeah.
First, before I do that, I just want to say that I support definitely continuing the relationship. I really
Thank you.
appreciate all that, like I said, all that you've done and the knowledge that you bring to this. But carrying on with what you just said, is there you said when they reach the level of what can be learned in the class, what else can we be doing?
Mhm.
Is there anything that we can be doing now when someone gets to class and runs through and and is done with the lesson and has 30 minutes? Is there anything that you've seen in practice that you can recommend to help with that kind of a gap?
Yeah, one of our recommendations that you'll see inside of the report is really to think about leveraging your curriculum and your standards in a way to extend those for students in a prepared way, meaning we have grade level curriculum and we know what we're going to teach, but all of those standards can be extended. So when we think about our second grade ELA unit, can we create an enrichment or an extended unit who we know some kids are going to need and be ready for, that's just part of our curriculum, so that no matter what teacher the student has, there's always access to that prepared, extended, enriched curriculum for that student to be implemented in their classroom. And it might be that they need that every unit or every other unit and that they're just over ready. It may also be the case where we're finding chronic over readiness. And if we're measuring that, we're realizing that they're even beyond our extensions. That's when we problem solve and think about how far above grade level is this child really ready to work and learn. And then we want to start diagnosing that through our MTSS process in a way that helps us better place that child in a learning environment that's right-sized.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work and for all the time and your colleagues for coming and your expertise and your knowledge and your everything. Prior to the meeting, these are going to be randomly, and I think best directed kind of to both Dr. Johnson and while you're still here and you're with us. For MTSS, we spent, as everybody knows, I mean, this has been going on, and I think it's a great place where we're at today with MTSS and how much work the committee has done and where we're at. Is it typical for an MTSS plan to, forgive me if I'm misunderstanding, but as of right now, it's my understanding that our MTSS is not considering advanced learners. The one we just built, the one that's new right now, that we're rolling out this year. Can we just have the task force be the MTSS committee that we just had build the MTSS and go through our existing plan and simply now look through the lens of the advanced learners and not kind of recreate the wheel with a task force when we already have an MTSS committee? So that's my first question.
probably best for me to answer, if you're okay with
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
So our current MTSS plan, we worked with an organization similar to Northwestern, but specifically the Illinois MTSS network. So we did ask a group to come help and facilitate our work in developing our guidebook. The current practice, and I answered your question with this, I'm not sure if you saw it this afternoon, that is outlined in the MTSS guidebook as it relates to advanced learners is looking to be very intentional, as you spoke, ironically, about how we provide that tier 1 differentiation or enrichment in the classroom to those students who are ready to move forward with that. The current MTSS practice for advanced learners, as it's currently written, does not extend in that similar tier 2, tier 3 look as it does because our focus for that, as led out by Illinois MTSS network, was on our students who are not yet meeting grade level standards. That is the traditional model of MTSS. So it's definitely very intriguing to see how we can think about it, to your point, in the same lens. But I am not sure if the processes and procedures as outlined of how we decide who students are, because we're looking at students who are below the 25th percentile, below the 10th percentile, would be an exact like copy and paste, just flip it to the other side. I think from a structural standpoint, it looks similar, but we would really have to think about, like, we have clearly established already what is tier 2 for our learners who need more support. What does that look like? We already have established what does tier 3 look like for our students who need additional support. We don't have that established for tier 2 and tier 3. So our task force needs to look at these recommendations, and if that's the route we decide to go, take those models and match them with the level of service that we would see our data would show that we would need. So I don't know if the MTSS group, based on who our participants are on that, would be the same staff members that I would bring into this conversation, because we have a lot of interventionists. We have special education teachers. Well, their input is going to be valuable because we will need to think about our 2E students, our ELL students. I will need additional classroom teachers because their role is going to be most heavily relied on to be able to carry this out. So yes, I think from the surface level, you could look at that, but there's a whole other layer of planning that would need to happen, that I would need some very specific skill sets from individuals to be able to help provide that input. So, but my hope is that we can bring the two together in some way. So instead of it being like the triangle we're used to seeing, it would almost be like a parallelogram, or a diamond of showing, yep.
Can I add a little context to that too?
Yeah.
Part of the reason we make a recommendation to districts to shift to that MTSS philosophy is because almost every school district already has an MTSS structure that's functioning. Teachers are already familiar with identifying needs that look discrepant and what a problem-solving process looks like to prescribe and define intervention and or prescribe and define intense intervention if that's the case. And so the structure makes a lot of sense, but not a lot of school districts do that. They use that MTSS process really robustly for students who aren't yet at grade level. We want to bring that same level of urgency to serving advanced students and applying that same problem-solving part of that to what does a student who needs an intense intervention, beyond their grade level look like? And who are our most discrepant students in tier 3 that need something very different from everybody else? And what is that? Because not every tier 3 service is identical for every student, depending on what their needs look like. So leveraging what's already in place, we feel like is a really practical way to move the needle, especially for school districts who haven't thought about delivering services in a model that looks like that.
Certainly makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so again, I'm going to probably jump around, but the district back up until 2015, you may not be aware of the history of this, but up until 2015 had enrichment program, and it was, to my understanding, a a classroom, one classroom per grade. And we had, and I think it was first grade through eighth grade, and we had enrichment math, English, science, and social studies. I'm assuming because this was the same class, they're teaching everything, right? So we eliminated that in 2015. I'm looking at the presentation that Julie referenced earlier, and it says that we went from one model to another. So this presentation back in 2015 speaks to what we had and what we're going to have. To my knowledge, nothing has happened between then and now. And what this is saying is that we were implementing a cluster model of enrichment, which should still be the case now. So don't we have the model, like define, what we're talking about in the report is define, I think what you just spoke to, Dr. Johnson, was defining what our program is going to look like, if it's going to look like cluster or something else. And I guess I'm just confused because I thought we have cluster right now.
I have looked at that report as well, and since day one I have been here, that has not been the model that has been in place. That was not in place when I arrived. So I would have to do some historical research as to why that was never implemented based on that recommendation, or if it was, when it stopped, it would have been prior to my arrival. I don't know if anyone on the board who's been here, Mike usually is our historian, but he's not here. So that would be something I would have to really do some research on as to if that was the recommendation, why it either never got off the ground or it was stopped at some point between then and when I started. That was not something since I've started, stopped. It was never here when I started.
So somewhere between 2015 and 2021, 21, we are not delivering what this says, and I haven't seen of anything in between. So yeah, I guess that's a research. Yeah,
because that may have been a recommendation that ended up not being something that at the time was not decided to be implemented. I can't speak to that because it was prior to my time, but I'm happy to try to do some research. The only administrator that is still here from that time is Mike. So I would need to see what I can find out.
See, because the other part of that is it doesn't say anything about the English enrichment at the junior high going away.
Yep.
And then that happened too.
Yeah. So I did speak to Dr. Rolanitis about that today because I know I received your question. He said that recommendation happened at the same time. And I was looking at the same slides you are, as trying to find some information for you. I noticed that as well. But in speaking with Dr. Rolanitis this afternoon, I know he's down with his daughter moving her into college, but he said that recommendation happened at the same time. And that group of students, they transitioned that out as they moved through the junior high.
I think you understand where I'm going. I'm concerned that, like, to Julie's point, we have done this review before, and it didn't concern, to my knowledge, an outside consultant, but certainly there was a lot of data analyzed, a lot of the state of affairs at that time was analyzed, and a new plan was put in place. At some point between 2015 to today, something happened. How can we make sure that that doesn't happen again? And I think that, implementation plan for next year is certainly great. Obviously, we know our students need it. We know our teachers want it. They're behind it. We know our administrators are behind it. We know it's in the strategic plan. The board has endorsed this for implementation next school year. We're all on board with it. But part of what came out of this report is I feel like what we can do now, right? So there's a lot of communication breakdown with the parents. You know, what can we do right now to plumb up getting parents what they need today for this school year? You know, getting the tools to the teachers. You know, teachers. But the percentage of teachers that participated in this was really big, and it's, you know, they said their piece. We know it is. It's clear. And it's great because it's good knowledge. But like, we don't have to wait a year to get them what they need.
And the intention of when we look at what was shared back in December, this year is our planning and preparation year, which includes what type of professional development will our teachers need to implement next school year? What tools and materials will our teachers need to implement next school year? So that timeline is not saying we're not going to do anything. This is when we have to prepare so that we're ready to work with students the following school year. So when I define preparation, I define that as what you're saying. What is the professional development? What are the materials that our teachers need? What are the assessments we need to look at? And so to your question earlier about how do we not let this happen again, I am right there with you. I hope by now you would see through my work with our MTSS committee, we've redefined our ELL programming. We've implemented 3 ELA curriculums since I've been here, and they are going well. Like, I am committed. I have a process that involves our administrators, involves our staff members to ensure that collaborative decisions are made so that we have sustained improvement in programs in our district. So in order for that to not happen, we really need to work together collaboratively over the next year to be very intentional about what our next steps look like, so everyone feels supported, everyone feels like they have what they need in terms of knowledge and tools to be able to do this well in the classroom. So that would be how I feel. We don't let this happen again, is that we take our time, we're intentional, we listen to our teachers, we listen to our administrators, and ensure that we are all walking together down the same road in terms of what this will look like for our students.
That's fair, Dr. Johnson, and nobody wants to be rash and do anything quick that is going to be a recipe for disaster.
Correct. And that's potentially why we've seen things not go well in the past.
Right. When we looking at the strategic plan, you know, one of the other things I wanted to talk about was the assessments, because that was specifically part of the strategic plan, and that was touched upon back in 2015 when we went through the first iteration. Is the limitation of FastBridge, and it's still from 2015 today. We are still doing FastBridge. Now this is one of our strategic plans. It is the board, the community in the strategic planning process had its own thing for, you know, the district shall support and monitor a developmentally appropriate benchmark assessment system, which is FastBridge, right? That's what we're talking about here. The goal was that we were going to implement this 2 to 3 years from the year 3 is now, right? And looking back, I didn't put this together until really right now, because I didn't understand what a benchmark assessment was versus a
Formative and summative.
Now I get it, but and that's why I was asking, like, we're already working on this assessment, and we've already implemented 2 curriculums. We're doing one now. We implemented one already. I don't understand how the teachers don't have what they need, and how the enriched curriculum isn't that part of what we have done.
Yeah. So in terms of the assessments that are part of curriculum programs, those assessments are aligned specifically to the grade level standards that we are responsible for teaching through the state of Illinois. So the assessments that have been adopted through the programs are just that. They are designed to assess either formatively on the spot for our teachers so they can make adjustments to their instruction, or summatively towards the end of each unit, so they can see like how well have students done over this unit of study. But again, those are very specific, and this is not unique to the things we've adopted to grade level standards, because that's what we're teaching through our core instruction. When we think about the benchmark assessment or a screening tool, those are typically the assessments that really look at a student's like zone of proximal development. So as Melissa's indicated, those assessments should be telling us where is a student in relation to those grade level standards, how far are they above, are they on, are they below? So that's different than the assessments that come to us through curriculum programs. So I've worked really hard on that strategic goal to make sure that our teachers have the assessment tools in their classrooms to see how well students are performing in their curriculum that they're teaching on a day-to-day basis. A next layer in implementing that particular strategic goal is taking a closer look at that benchmark assessment. So we've got those three pieces. As Melissa indicated earlier as well, we have put that one towards the end of working on that strategic goal for a very intentional purpose. The state of Illinois continues to kind of toss around what their assessment will look like. They've recently made a shift from SAT to ACT. So they're doing some stuff at the high school level, and typically that's a precursor to things that may trickle down to us. So I've been trying to be very intentional and keeping abreast on what's happening at the state level, because they have made statements that they may change our assessments to make them similar to what we're talking about with the benchmark. So what I didn't want to happen is that we pick a new benchmark and then the next year later, the state says, never mind everyone, we are using this. Because, trying to be mindful of teachers learning new things and having historical data, I was concerned that if that came to fruition, we would be jerking around our staff of like this assessment, no, this assessment. So now that we've seen some movement at the high school level, we need to now do a little bit more research to see what might that do to impact us at the elementary level, and are we safe to make a move, or should we wait to see what they're going to do in the next year or two? So that's going to help us make our decision. And now that we are seeing some movement, I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable in moving forward in moving that benchmark assessment process forward.
Okay.
So just to provide some like historical of like where that
I
comes
appreciate
from.
that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So when you're saying the state for I understand ACT,
Yes.
SAT.
Yeah.
Are we talking about IAR right now?
Correct.
Okay. So
Correct. That's what is currently happening.
that's what is currently, and so that we're thinking the state is going to change IAR to
there was
maybe.
talk of that at one point over the past couple years. I'm not sure if that's the direction it's going to go at this point, but that was definitely conversation that was being had at the state level. And so again, wanting to be intentional about not wanting to shift, really thinking of like wanting to make sure that that was not going to happen before moving forward with a benchmark assessment. So yes, we are well aware that that is the next step in the strategic plan. And I think this now gives us the fuel to say, okay, we've established those formative and summative assessments. Now are we at a spot to feel safe to move forward with looking at an additional benchmark tool? Yes.
Okay, so the plan is for strategic plan, for strategic plan goal 1E, this benchmark one, as part of your task force, at the end of the school year, currently right now, at the end of 2025, we're going to have an updated enrichment advanced learner program and a new assessment tool that we're going to.
I would hope that we can engage in that conversation, but I don't want to promise anything today because I have not sat down with our stakeholder groups to have those conversations. But we would take those recommendations into our work. Clearly, there is a need to look more at our assessments, but I don't want to sit here and promise anything today without engaging in that collaborative work.
So, I'm sorry, you're not promising, we already have it as a strategic goal, right? Are you talking about the assessment that you're not promising or the revised enrichment?
The assessment.
Okay, so we're going to provide, the expectation is that there will be a new revised enrichment advanced learner program at the end of this year and potentially maybe
Yes.
not.
Yes.
But we're probably not going to stay with Fastbridge. Is that
I would assume based on this, we need to take a closer look at what else is out there.
okay?
Yep.
So let me just get back to my notes for 1 second. I had a number of questions. I want to make sure I don't. The kindergarten screenings, that was an interesting part that you brought up that I wrote a note on. Dr. Johnson, I would be interested in, in your follow-up and as part of this, to look, because that's something we for sure are doing. I know that, but I don't know if we've ever, how many years back we have of that. Second year. So new data, now we know, and we're tagging these kids when they're 5. We know who they are, some of them, right? With the screening, the advanced learner kids.
We have not had a process for identifying those students yet. I'm reading and listening along with you. So in terms of identifying, using that screening tool to identify, we haven't used that screening tool to identify. That screening tool was simply to learn who our students are, where their strengths are, and where their needs are. Make sure that we are separating and developing really heterogeneous groupings. And so we are not overloading classrooms unintentionally with needs, so they're more balanced. That's the purpose of the screening. It's never been used to identify. We have a process for early entrance into kindergarten. We have that process, but we have not at this point used it for that purpose. The teachers did not indicate that that's how we wanted to use that.
So
I think you had mentioned, right, the kindergarten screening.
So let's be careful with the word screening. If you have a screening process where you screen students when they walk in the door or before they get here, oftentimes those processes are used to identify students who may be at risk to not meeting benchmarks throughout their kindergarten year, and we want to know that. They may not necessarily be designed to know if kids are functioning well beyond those. They may be meeting benchmarks early, which can be a sign of talent in very young students, but I would need to better understand what that screening process looks like. But our kindergarten teachers are probably the best formative assessment specialists on the planet because they are constantly assessing, they constantly know, they are constantly gauging where kids are. Are they meeting these benchmarks? Are they moving at a developmental pace that is similar to their peers and to those benchmarks or expectations that we see? When, however, we see kids that are on a trajectory to meet many of those benchmarks really early, if we have a kindergartner coming in who's meeting all of the end of kindergarten benchmarks at the beginning of the year, that's when an MTSS process can kick in and we say, we have 3 or 4 kids that aren't a great fit for what's happening every single day in our classroom. How do we support our teachers to identify what those learning needs are, not put a label on a student for a program, but what are those learning needs and how do we make sure that we provide support for those teachers and for those students to move them along a year's trajectory that may look differently from their other students and kindergarten peers.
So I'm to be the same, one and the same, but they're 2 different things.
It could be, but I don't know. I'm not intimately familiar with what that screening process is, so I don't want to misspeak about is that tool valuable in recognizing students who have advanced learning potential, right? Yeah. Sometimes homemade is good, though. I mean, right? Standard design and homemade. Those are great. Also, great layers. Multiple data points, profiles of students are what we recommend to be able to identify talent and serve it. Not just one data point on one day, right? We want to serve a collective student who's a body of work. Yeah.
Okay, so looking back, I think I don't know if I was the only one, but I misunderstood kind of what was going to come out of this study. because when I look back at in December of 2023, last December, the board approved your services, and a timeline was provided to the board. And the timeline at that point said that construction of the implementation plan would have been done by June. I misunderstood that. I thought we were going to be seeing an implementation plan right now. I think what we're seeing now is that the implementation plan will be done by the task force over the next, I don't know, how many months, or do we know that?
I hope that we would have a solid plan by the end of the first semester. That would be my goal.
Okay, so the goal is by the end of the first semester. And the communication to parents, things that we see in the report that aren't necessarily tied to a new program, like tied to right now, right? Getting teachers what they need in the classroom, getting the expectations from the teachers very clear, giving parents the communication and knowledge, and that could be done faster, right?
Sure. There are some things that
And the communication to parents.
yeah, I mean, I can definitely.
Currently happening. I will definitely be seeking some feedback on that. Beyond what we have in our handbook and our website, we do have information there. So what else should we be doing to be getting that information out there? I'd be happy, to take feedback on that, and if it's something that we can easily do. Sure.
Well, the parents, I mean, what else do we have to be doing? I think we're doing, right? Well, we're doing what we have to be doing.
She reviewed what we were supposed to be doing in terms of communicating, like acceleration, early entrance.
We went through sort of those policies. The legislation requires that they be posted in a public place, and they are accessible to the public and anybody who wants to go and find that can. We have some minor recommendations about shifting some of the language and some of the requirements in your policy, some of the timelines, and really our acceleration is a fairly effective, widely used intervention in Tier 3 for students who need that type of service. Our recommendation in thinking about acceleration through the lens and filter of MTSS is that we would no longer rely solely on parents to be the purveyors and the requesters for acceleration, but that we would look internally for students who are good candidates for acceleration as a responsive service as part of our MTSS plan, not as a request that comes from an external source. So we want that embedded in the problem solving that we're already doing in-house. It's a little different for early entrance to kindergarten and first grade because those students are not yet known to us. We don't know those students. And so having a system by which we can really diagnose, are those students a really good fit to come to us early or not? We want to keep those layers of things in place. But yeah, the transparency piece of that is there. How we communicate how transparent those pieces are and how well we equip our teachers to have conversations with our parents about what our processes and programs and services are and how comfortable they feel about that and what are the selection criteria or profile for students, and is my student close to having the traits of that profile, or does my student exhibit those traits, and what could we expect from here? Like those kinds of conversations and communications are critical. And so how do we take our first steps here to really help our teachers and empower them to know what our process is, what's happening in this task force? How do we keep parents abreast of that? All of those things are part of that communication piece.
One of the pieces I know we've had some conversation about is really thinking about what's currently in place and how do we communicate that better. For example, one of the things that we've had some questions about, which leads us to believe that we could be more effective in our communication, is how are students, what is the timeline for selection into our junior high math enrichment course? So that's definitely something, like how do we equip our fifth grade teachers to knowledgeably speak to that with families? How do we share that timeline with families proactively? So that, to your point, is an easy, that's something we already have in place. So how do we strengthen communication of things that are already in place? In terms of communicating what the future looks like, I don't know what to communicate because we don't know what it looks like. But to your point, that is an example of something that we could do now because it's something we already have in place, if that answers your question.
Right. And
Yeah.
that the communication that, with your focus groups and your surveys, parents very clearly and teachers very clearly said, we don't know what our child is getting. We don't know what the district is doing, and we don't know what to request, so I get that you can't tell the future and tell them what's going to happen next year now. I understand that. But like you said, we're doing stuff now. What can we do now?
Mm-hmm.
How can we service the kids, give the teachers what they need, and communicate with the parents now on anything? Is there anything? And let's, talk about doing that. Yeah. With the eighth grade, there was a good point that I wanted to bring up too with that junior high. That's the perfect example. So the junior high has we call it enrichment math, but it's really accelerated math, right? I mean, and we added a section of each grade last year. So there's some-ish each grade
Mm-hmm.
in this enrichment math. And we are communicating with parents because they're choosing if they want to put their kid in it, right?
Correct. And I can have Mr. Munch because he's the one who sends out the communication to families every summer. Do you want to share what that looks like for us?
looking at students that maybe right from the class of being enrolled in those classes, but now are performing well within our system, within the junior high. It is a big step forward. Look at that criteria as well and have another conversation. Our teachers, their performance in the classroom, their character traits in regards to are they hardworking and understand all these things of that stuff. And then we also talk to parents as well. So that's a good step. Really take them. So we need to have that communication back and forth as much as possible with parents for them involved in that.
Thank you, and welcome to the table.
Sorry. But I know you do a really great job with the communication, so I wanted you to speak to that.
So they are, and that was going to be one of my questions was, yeah, like anybody onboarding at any point after fifth grade, if coming in sixth grade, that's easy. Anybody onboarding after that is not as easy because they're skipping. Is there offboarding going on too? Do you have a system to address that? Does that happen?
Are you talking about kids that just aren't meeting expectations within the grade level?
Enrichment, within the
Sure.
enrichment, yeah.
I think that would be more of a discussion that we have with parents. I'm trying to think back. This is year
I agree with
6
that.
for me, and I don't think we have done that. I don't think I've had to have that conversation. Maybe one time, but that was a parent, if I'm thinking correctly and recalling correctly, a parent asking to remove their child not because of ability, but more of anxiety towards that class.
Thank you. That makes sense. Yeah. I'm just going to make sure I have nothing else on my list. I'm sorry. I don't know when you'll be back, so I just want to make sure that I covered all my questions here, MTSs.
I'm asking a quick question.
Sure.
Dr. Johnson, do you have the flexibility in the second half of the semester to provide, the opening or the availability for necessary professional development?
Yes.
That would incorporate
Yes.
this? So there's openings for swapping in and out and stuff like that? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, we have an early release day almost every month that we can utilize for professional development, and we try really hard to make sure that that's related to specific school improvement or district goals, and this is definitely a district goal. So we have opportunities there, but if it necessitates longer than the time we have, we could utilize having the teacher substitute out of the classroom for the day, or, there's other methodologies that we can do based on the intensity of the professional learning that's needed. Mm-hmm.
I have 2 follow-up questions, or more of a statement. I think teachers know who these kids are. They probably know better than everybody. So I would, especially for the referrals, for that to be not just based on at any level, at every option, to have teachers have that avenue to be able to refer a student. And then my last thing is I would just ask that you consider involving parents on your task force. And I said that to you in the email, but I think it would go a long way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I just have one follow-up question as we're the discussion what's going on. So you mentioned early on in your presentation the word equity. The past 3 years we've been hammered at the annual school board conference, equity in the state, equity. I think 25% of the presentations are all on equity at the annual conference for school board officials, right? And if you look at this year, it's looking like that's going to be the same theme, equity, right? So, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but maybe you can at least try. So I know you're on the talent development side, but I have one, concern. with the state that's pushing the equity.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying, but it's a very clear priority at the state of Illinois.
Mhm.
And we have, identified here in the data that our free and reduced lunch students are scoring lower than students that are not on free and reduced lunch.
Correct.
And we're looking at a program potentially where we're, looking at assisting students in like the 90th percentile, maybe the 80th percentile. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
So with the equity theme, I guess my concern is, have you seen in your, years of experience and Northwestern's experience that school districts get in trouble for focusing and putting in place programs that are assisting the students in like the 80th, 90th percentile to achieve more, when you have, every school is going to have students in the 20th percentile, right?
Of course.
30th percentile. You have to. It's just mathematically, you have to, right? So is there any risk that we put these programs in place and we put this effort in and the state comes back in and says, you know what? You guys focus on the wrong people. You need to be focusing on these students in the 10th percentile, the 20th percentile, getting them up to the 50th percentile,
Right.
as opposed to helping, a student, let's say in the 90th percentile, get to the 95th percentile.
Sure.
Or
Right.
challenging that student when really, the focus isn't in the right spot from a state standpoint. Have you seen any, I don't want to put this program in place that's great, and then the state come in and say, Mokena 159, you guys are just not doing it right. You're not looking at the right areas. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
It does. And I think from an equity standpoint, I don't think equity means we have to choose, right? What happens for those kids may not always look equally the same, but I don't think we have to pick and choose who we serve and how we serve them. Do we have to do this, or is it this? We certainly want to consider both. The way we serve those students would be different. The reason we bring equity into the conversation, and so what I would suggest is, to your point about students who are in the 25th percentile, we know that we want to work on those students' achievement. We would love to grow them to proficiency, that level at our state where we believe students are well aligned to grade level standards. We would love to grow them to that place. If they're the 25th percentile, there's a really big gap between where their achievement is and where we would like to see their achievement. So there is a lot of work to be done there. But in that same vein, we also want to provide at least a year's worth of growth for our most talented students. We don't want them to stagnate, and we don't want to believe that just because they are already proficient that they're fine. If they're already at this level, that's their starting point. And then how do we then stimulate a year of growth for that student? Because that's what's equitable in service, right? That equitable piece. It may not look the same. Intervention on one side of MTSS could look very differently than it does on the other, on this side. I haven't seen the state of Illinois look at school districts and say, don't serve your highest achievers because you're not doing very well serving your low achievers, right? So like balancing that out. The reason we bring that up though is if you're going to choose to serve your high achievers, best practice says that they're not all white and they don't all come from families who have means, right? That there are talented students who are on free and reduced lunch, who are Black and brown, and who haven't had the same access to experiences that students of means do. So how do we level that playing field? We expose them to those things early. We intervene early, and not just in trying to bring up the rear, but we expose them to enriching experiences early, enrichment for all kids, problem solving early. How do we sort of level that playing field of access and exposure that they come to us without, so that when we're ready to identify talent to be served differently, there's a more level playing field for that. That's kind of the idea behind equity, not just are we doing it for this group or are we doing it for that group? And I haven't seen the state come to a school district and say, don't serve these high achieving kids. I have seen groups come to school districts who have an equitable balance and say, why aren't these kids having the same access to those programs as others? So does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think ahead of
Sure. Yeah.
potential things down the road.
And-
I know it's early because
Yeah.
we haven't even started the task force yet.
And,
so
and to be honest
it
with you,
could be,
the
who
state of
knows?
Illinois is a little late to the game in terms of requiring school districts to report out how they're serving advanced learners. Finally, on the state report card, after years of advocacy and legislation lobby, we now have, we have to report out how many students are identified, how many students are we accelerating, how many students are getting access to Algebra 1 as 8th graders. All of those are now indicators for advanced learners on our state report card. And so that's progress for us to keep track of some data pieces about what's happening. But our state does not require us to have advanced learner programs. It only requires that we have a policy for acceleration, not that we do it really well or that we accelerate kids all the time as best practice.
And Eric, I will add, just to bring some peace of mind, if you think about where we've been over the past couple years, we've had a lot of focus on what do we do better for all kids, and that's in terms of our Tier 1 curriculum implementations that we've done across the district. And we're at a really great place now where we start thinking about how do we move and think about our students on other ends of that as well. So we couldn't get to a place of saying, how do we support or how do we extend if we didn't have the core in place to say, what are we extending beyond or supporting towards? And so now that those pieces are in place, our MTSS process that we've currently worked through are providing that support for the students who are not yet at grade level standards. And then the work that we're doing with Northwestern is going to help us provide supports for the students who may be beyond the standards. So we're in a really good spot as a district where we've established the core. We're working on systems to support those who aren't there. And now we're going to work on systems to support those students who might need a little bit more. So we're trying to cover the whole continuum.
That's good.
I'd
We
like-
need to be helping all students, so that's good.
I'd like to note that when we get to section 6 of the policy, we have a policy that uses the word shall implement an advanced placement program, and that process include multiple individuals, including the administrators, teachers, support personnel, and parents and guardians. So it's almost as if these are competing messages, so we really need to take a close look at that when we implement. And on that note, do you have guidance on what a task force looks like from your experience? What has worked well?
Yeah, so what we recommend is that stakeholders who are going to be involved in allocation of resources be part of that task force. Stakeholders who are administrators who understand what school improvement goals and or greater district strategic plan goals are involved in this process. And then also our practitioners who are going to be doing the work, and those people who we know are working with those students and who understand what have our processes looked like in the past and what is our vision moving forward. How do we want to get those structures in place in the most efficient and effective way to affect the most number of students as quickly as possible.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
We
much. I
look
appreciate your
forward
time.
to having what you. Oh,
Thanks, Melissa.
Of course.
A lot of effort in this.
Ah.
As much as we're talking about advanced learners,
Sure.
is it fair to say this is going to help raise a high tide to help all the kids in the district? I mean, whether we're talking about free and reduced lunch, we're talking about math equity, et cetera. Whether the primary focus may be advanced learning, the truth is this is really going to help out everybody. Is that a fair point?
Yeah, exposure to enrichment, engaging cognitively complex activities, problem solving, all of those practices are good for all students, no matter what their academic profile looks like. We want to teach them to be engaged in learning. We want to support their psychosocial skill development and becoming problem solvers and owning of their learning and moving the needle from wherever it is that they're starting. So these best practices that we think about when we think about advanced learners are truly and really best practices for all. Differentiation is valuable for every student in the classroom.
Sounds like a mission statement for a task force.
Yeah. And that has been like, I'm sure you've heard the quote, like high tides raise all boats. And so like that has been the framework we've looked at a lot of our work with. We've adopted very rigorous curriculum in our classrooms, and we're seeing all students rise to that challenge. I mean, the data we looked at earlier with the growth in ELA, to have that significant amount of growth, it's impacting all students. We're seeing the number of students that have 5 without having the programming at this point. So I can only imagine where that will go, continue to grow year after year. So our teachers are doing very great things already in their classrooms, and those growth numbers show that. So by continuing to strengthen our programming, we're only going to continue to see that raise for all kids. So, yeah.
Mrs., are you done? Jim, I'm sorry. If you had the perfect world, right? You had your own school and it looked like ours. It looked like our district. Where's the sweet spot to implement? What grade level is the best to start for an enrichment?
Every grade level should have enrichment built in, right? Like that is just best practice. Where do we start? Where do we start identifying students who need something different? It varies because the way curriculum instruction is set up in each school district is different. So the question here in Mokena looks very different somewhere else. So we want to think about exposing kids early. We want to think about identifying unique differences when they happen. How do we serve those? Collectively, we want to understand that MTSS process, because do we have a lot of students at tier 2, right? Do we have a whole bunch of kids who look like they need to be accelerated? Because if we do, that's a tier 1 problem, right? Is our tier 1 curriculum not rigorous enough for the kids that are here? And I know that that's the work that this district has already engaged in and already worked on, is creating really robust tier 1 spot. Then beyond that, who needs something different? But we want to look at every grade level in terms of that. Whether we have a diagnosed designated program, service or not, what we do for those students at every grade level should be something that we talk about on this task force and throughout this process.
Okay, thank you. And my last, thank you so much. I mean, I know your feet are hurting. I'm sorry to have, I feel horrible, like I was going to bring you a chair. My last thing, Dr. Johnson, and thank you for all the work, and I do believe you will deliver a fine program for our district, and I look forward. It's very exciting. I think that as part of the task force, and I'm sure you will do this, but it's important that we look at the other feeder schools going in the Lincoln Way and the trajectory that, we want our kids to come into Lincoln Way in honors English. I don't know if there's honors social studies or if it's just math and reading, but whatever, you get my point. So I'm sure you'll look at, the other feeder districts, what they're doing as a comparison and what Lincoln Way is doing.
Sure, most definitely. And that was something, so I had done a study with the class of 2023 that went into high school, and I analyzed our honors placements in ELA and math as it relates to the feeder districts. And I was pleasantly surprised at like where we fell in terms of placement. So this was that one class year for English. We placed 36% of students. Martino placed 37%. New Lenox, Liberty placed 30%. Manhattan placed 26%. Hickory Creek placed 43, Summit Hill placed 39. So we were right there with all the other feeder districts in terms of the percentage of students who were placed, automatically enrolled, I would say, into those honors courses. In math, we were right there as well. So that is something that I do take a close look at to see like how many percentage of students are we placing in comparison to the feeder districts to see, is there a large discrepancy? Is there not? Because what this is, we have a district on here that has 2 layers of enrichment in their district, and they only place 3% more of students in ELA for this class into the honors courses at the high school. So this helps me see like who should we be tapping into to see is their programming model more effective than what we're currently doing to place students into the honors courses. So I do have that data that helps me kind of see, like, is there someone that I should be looking at more than others? Because this data is showing who is being more effective in growing the number of students who are being placed into those courses. So yeah, I mean, without even having anything, we were right there in the mix for ELA beyond what's happening in the classrooms in terms of the number of students that auto-enrolled in that particular school year. So yes, definitely will. But I also want to be mindful of what programming models are shown to be the most effective. I don't want to just mimic something because this district's doing it. If it's not showing that they're placing a significant increase of students, I don't know if that's the program I would want to emulate. That makes sense. Yeah, yep. But yes, thank you.
Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you very much.
You.
Thank you.
All right, next on is presentation on the budget. Dr. Shaw, no pressure. Follow that presentation. I think Charles in 5 minutes exactly.
All right, well, tonight we are going to see the tentative budget. July 17th, this is the timeline. Last month you received a working copy of the Skyward budget. It was the second draft. And tonight you also received a copy of the Skyward budget, which has been uploaded into the state budget form. So the state budget form is actually what you're going to approve and will be put on display. The state budget form is just a moment in time, so you'll see what it is for today. The Skyward budget's a little easier to read, kind of gives you this year and then a 3-year look back, so you have a little more data to do some analysis on it. So we have that. Tonight we're going to, requesting that the board approve the tentative budget. It is then put on display for 30 days. And how it is put on display, it's added to our website. We've got paper copies available in the district office. And the board secretary will publish a notice in the paper that the budget is on display and available at the district office if anyone would like to pick up a copy of it. Also, part of that approval tonight is to set September 18th as the night for the public hearing on the board. And that at that meeting, there's opportunity for public board members to make comment. And then you would approve the final budget and it gets submitted to the state, to the Will County, and the Will County clerk and the ROE. Timeline. Our goal in the budget is to stay between 33 and 65% of fund balances. And this is the look at our financial profile score. And so it looks like I got this data downloaded from ISB, and it looks like 2022, they have like a double stack on there at 8, where if it's actually, I just pulled the data from the state board. So it's actually still in the 4 range with recognition. Just is stacked very odd. So the district is in very good financial health with our financial profile score from ISB and financial recognition. Some highlights for the 25 budget. First, we'll take a look at a little bit at the revenue. So we have a little bit of increase in our evidence-based funding. So this information came to me, our final numbers for evidence-based funding last Friday. So that's as soon as the information was given to the districts across the state. We do have an Elevating Educators Special Ed grant for $105,000. We did see another decrease in our Title I funding, and we do have an increase in our local revenue. So our revenue is funded 50% by our levy we did in 2023, which was 5. And then this year, we'll do the levy in December, and that CPI is 3.4. And then another highlight in our revenues is that in Fund 21, we do not want to have a carryover balance, and so we do have our revenue from Fund 21, and we have a deficit spending in Fund 21. The expense side, we've got all of our collective bargaining agreements. Salary and benefits make up the majority of our business because we are a people business. And we do have an addition of 1.0 at a social worker. We also have the addition of the STAR program in our budget. We're still working out a lot of the details of that budget. We have our contractual obligations, purchase services, which is also people. We have our first grand and 5th grade Chromebook refresh. Okay, it's just a typo on my part. Curriculum textbooks and workbooks are big supply items. We do have capital plan expenditures and then our purchase of our 2 school buses out of our Fund 40. So this is what the budget looks like. So in our ed fund, we've got unaudited beginning fund balances. So we still are waiting upon our audit. We'll see that audit in September, October. But our unaudited fund balance have the year ending or starting at $16,027,000 and ending at $14,107,000. $1 million of that deficit is in Fund 21. So the purpose of Fund 21 is to spend all of it. We did have $3 million in fund balance, or we had $1 million in fund balance. We have $2 million in revenue, so we have a $3 million expenditure in FY25. When we look at the far right column, the percent of balanced annual expenditures, this is the best it's ever looked. It is all in green, except, the red for the O&M referendum money, which is supposed to be down there at 0.1%. So it's all in green. And then when we get to the bottom, the working cash, tort, and life safety are funds that we really don't use. And so they do have some fund balance to expense in the high numbers. Those are yellow. But I think this might be the first year that we got all of them in green. So we do have some deficit, a little deficit in the ed fund, but we also, as most people in here understand, that my budgeting style is really conservative on revenue and liberal on expenses, and typically that's a pretty good number where we'll end up with balance. The O&M fund, we do have a little bit of deficit there, so we'll be looking at that a little closer. The O&M referendum is exactly where it needs to be. Bond and interest, that is a bond and interest clean out with that deficit, which is part of the working cash process to support the transportation fund, which has a 16,000. So 16,000 is, with that budgeting style, we should be pretty good in the transportation fund. IMRF Social Security was purposeful because we needed to bring that fund balance down, and that's what our tentative budget looks like. Where does our money come from? The majority of our money comes from our local tax base. 86% comes from our local tax base, 8% from the state, 3% from the federal, and then this year we do have 2% with the working cash. So the majority of our money comes from our tax base, our residents and businesses inside Mokena. And where does our money go? We have salary and benefits are making up the majority of our expenses. Purchase services are also people and contractual obligations, so that's also people. And then we get into supplies, material, or items that are less than $500. Capital outlay or big ticket items, our capital threshold is $5,000, and so that $2.9 million is for projects. It's mostly our construction projects, the projects that we have outlined for FY25. Other objects is one of those it encompasses bond payments, tuition to special ed co-ops, and membership dues. Other objects. And then non-cap equipment are for purchases that cost between $500 and $5,000. So our beginning fund balance, this is just letting you take a look at the fund balances through the last 10 years. We've had pretty steady and consistent fund balance across the board. This is also another look of revenue and expenses. So in 2016, you issued the DSEP bonds, and so we had a spike of money came in, money went out. But other than that, it's pretty steady. Orange is the expenses and green is the revenue. Then the blue on the bottom is the fund balance. So you can see how pretty steady the fund balance has been through the last 15 years. It's been very, very steady. And said, how are we doing? So every March we do financial projections. And when we took a look at our financial projections with the fund balance policy being between 33 and 65%, and we know that we are on a healthy course. We do know that our unaudited fund balances were a little higher than budgeted, but that comes back to being conservative on revenue and liberal on expenses. And then we'll have our audit results in September. This was the chart from the March financial projections. So you can see the red line, which is our projected fund balances. The two blue lines are the 33 and 60% of expenses. So we do stay between the 33 and 65% guidelines.
Questions?
And I'm under in 1 hour and 59 minutes. Okay, I'm just,
Yes. Well, I do have a question.
Yeah, please.
I would disappoint you if I didn't have a question.
of course, of
I know I
course.
would. I know it's late, but can you go back to the tentative budget
Yes.
FY25 summary slide?
Yep, that's the one.
Okay, so what we're approving tonight, tentative basis, is a $1.9 million deficit for this upcoming school year.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So let's peel back the onion a little bit on this,
Yep,
right?
yep.
So and I know it's late, but it's 9:15, but bear with me, everybody. 1.9, right?
Mhm.
So let's take away $1 million from O&M because that's a timing difference, right?
It
We
is,
just-
it
The
is.
projects were started this year, didn't get finished this year, so they're going to be they started last fiscal year, they're into this fiscal year. So let's wipe that out. So now we're down to 900,000, right?
Right.
Deficit.
Right.
Then you look at that bond and interest fund. That was
Mhm.
specifically to purchase school buses to save the district long-term on leases as opposed to buying them up front. right?
Correct.
So then I back out that 218,000 roughly from the 900. Now I'm down to about 680, right? 680. I'm trying to get to what our true operating deficit is in this budget.
Mhm.
And I think it's 680. Would you agree with that on the math? You following me on the math? The 1.9, subtract out the million for the O&M.
It'd be
So-
very close. It'd be very close. I'd look at the top two lines, the ed fund and the O&M. Everything else is pretty purposeful. The top two lines.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to get to like.
Yeah,
the-
that's what
more
I- that's-
Like an operating.
Yeah, those are the two operating funds that I'd look at.
Got
That's the operating deficit as it is. Not everything that we have in this budget do we have to spend.
Right.
For example, I've got a brand new working budget for a department, right? I've got a brand new program with budgets. So what? For the new classroom, right, new classroom. So there are some budget items in here that we want to make sure that we've got money in the budget to start our year. We want to make sure that we've got money in the budget. Teachers, kids have what they need in our budget. So we start with that to make sure that we have what we need. If we have what we need, we may not and typically do not spend everything that is in that budget. We go through the amended budget process in the spring and we tighten it up even a little more.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you. So yeah, so if we take those type of lines, it's about 700 then.
Mm-hmm. That's what
I just don't want people to get sticker shock when they see like 1.9 million and they don't have any context around that. They're like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, what are you guys doing? You guys are going to be bankrupt in 10 years or 7 years, right? So that's just not the case.
It's not the
But,
case.
uh,
It's very
So the numbers can be deceiving sometimes if you don't have the right context around them. So that's
context and historical perspective of budgeting style and ending audit results compared to beginning budget balances.
Like any good budget, there's things in there you don't have to put in a couple plugs and figure it out.
It's the true statement. Thank you. Yes.
I'd just say too that this little 3 FRBUD 12 report that you printed, that's the best thing ever from a budget perspective.
It really is.
Seeing-
It does
seeing
give
current
you,
year versus a 3-year
Mhm.
history. You can, and line by line, it's just
Mhm.
phenomenal to like go with the ruler, just kind of go down. You can see really where things pop.
that was
from a
something new
differential
this year,
standpoint, so.
just because as we presented it early, here's our working copy that we're starting with. And then we had draft 2 and the one you see today is draft 3 and that's what's been uploaded to the state form. And typically from this to next month, there aren't any changes. Typically, I'm not saying that that's going to happen because we do have some things in progress that may change. And if they do to next month, I will certainly point them out.
Oh, I got it. Thank you.
Dr. Shaw, you and I sat down for 3 hours going over this budget, and I want to thank you for your time. And I agree with Eric. I think this is the winner chicken dinner. This is really great. Does the public see this? No, right? This is just us.
Well, you're seeing this. It's a budgeting tool. So there is a similar look, but it doesn't have the 3-year look back. The financial report that's posted every month looks like that with the original revised budget, and then it has year-to-date information. So the tool with that is to be able to take a look at that percentage of spent to budgeted, and then if you know what month you're in, say you're through December, you know you're 6 months through the year, that percentage number should be 50%. And if it's 99 or if it's 2, you know what's going on. If it's a salary number, it should be right on 50%. But if it's a capital outlay, maybe it's 2 because you haven't paid for anything. And if it's 99, maybe you paid for your service or your project, or you completed the project. So that is also like, it depends, it's on the circumstance.
And that's always, the timing. Thank you. I mean, this is great. And congratulations on the green. I mean, I think that's, and I know that the COVID and the building, what was it, the delay, the chiller and the tax payments and everything kind of has a play in the past couple of years. So thank you. And thank you for your time. And yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Dr. Shaw? Okay, very good, very good. Okay, moving on. Discussion item number 1 is superintendent search, full-time superintendent search. Go take that person. I don't. On that front. Okay, so this was requested last month at the end. I think Kelly requested it. Do you want to start, Kelly? Do you want me to start, or how do you want to do this?
Oh, you can start. Yeah. I mean, is that okay with you?
I could start, yes. So this is just my opinion. We're 7 of us here as one united front. But I think the first thing that we need to do, based on past experience, is decide whether or not we're going to use a search firm or go it alone on the search. So I don't know if people agree or not, but I think that's one thing that we kind of got to decide. And then if we decide to go with the firm, there are a few that are out there. I provided the board with the notes from Jen Riddell, who was the past president, when we did the last search on that she had on different search firms. So I think that's where we start, is discussing search firms, yes or no, and then try to whittle it down maybe to a couple, and then figure out what that process is to get them in or interview, make that decision, and then based on that firm, then we come up with a plan of timelines and things like that. That would be my thought. But again, I'm open to other people's thought. I'm just using experience as a guide.
Eric, I had forwarded the information from IASB previously. I'm happy to re-forward that if we utilize a service. I originally was not in favor of using a service only because we did have folks respond to the interim. But given the additional feedback from Mr. Stein that there are several positions that are open, superintendent searches, having somebody look and assist in it, I think is the way to go now. I am very happy with what IASB is offering, and I would support using them in that endeavor. And if you need more information, I can send that around.
Okay. Was it 29 or 39?
Well, still get used to this. Okay, I'm on. So last I checked, and anyone, this is public information, can check it, the IASA Job Bank. The IASA is kind of like the Principals Association for the state of Illinois.
They house a job bank, which is kind of the main repository of job listings for educators in the state of Illinois. I looked at it last week sometime, and if memory is serving me correctly, I believe there were about 26 or 27 current job postings for superintendents throughout the state of Illinois. In my experience, that is a huge number of superintendent postings that started just before the beginning of this fiscal year in June. So we're 1 month into the fiscal year, and there are that many superintendent postings. That's going to cause a trickle-down effect because some of those superintendents are going to be offered positions come October and November. Some of those will be seated superintendents, so there will be a game of musical chairs that takes place, and you will see other positions pop open because seated superintendents took positions, but there are still, as per this board, there are going to be a number of superintendent positions that just haven't been posted. And there's going to be superintendents in 2 and 3 months who say, I'm done. And you'll see those postings crop up in November, December, and January. So all of that is to say there are a ton of superintendent postings right now, and I believe it's imperative that you get the district out there in terms of the advertisement that you are searching for a permanent superintendent. So that's my thought.
Yeah, so that website's IASA, if anyone wants to go to a job bank, and you can filter by superintendents and principals and
Social studies teacher.
director
whatever.
of instruction and business managers. You can filter it by all that and see how many business managers are out there, and director of technologies. And so out there, you're not going anywhere. Yeah, so there is a lot out there. And I think when we, at least the board discussed previously, it was like we wanted to get this process started early because Mr. Stein's point, the first wave, all of a sudden that frees up that district, wherever the superintendent's leaving to go to new district, that frees up that one. And you just it's a domino effect throughout the whole school year. So you want to be first in line. So with that said, when we did this interim search, we said, hey, we want to be the first ones out there. So with that said, I think we should probably, unless people, is everyone in favor of using the search firm? Maybe we can just start with that.
I'd actually, go ahead, sorry.
Okay. So that's good. So if we move forward with trying to interview search firms, we don't, and then hopefully we can bring that to a vote on the September board meeting, or if we can get it done earlier, we can potentially have a special board meeting where we just approve it.
Might I suggest we try to have a special board meeting to interview 3 of these search firms and see what our thoughts are about working with one of them. As of right now, on the list I have in front of me, we have School Exec Connect. Sometimes people might have had other ideas, but they are still a reputable search firm. We still have IASB. BWP is a lot of money. Education Leadership Solutions is another option. HYA and Associates. I say we pick 3, we interview them and see what they can do for us. And if we don't like what they have to offer, we still have IASB, but I think we need to start making progress. And I think an interview, listening to their 3 options would help us. Is that a fair idea?
I just want to clarify something, Jim, is when you said we still have IASB, they're a tier 1 as well. They're in the mix as well. I wouldn't say that what they offer is any less than what some of the named firms.
I made no statement to say that they were less than suitable
when you
options.
said we still have IASB, I just didn't know what that meant. So
it meant we can interview 3, and if we like one of them, great. And if we want to go to another option, that's fine. But we've never used them in the past. We've experienced with at least 2 of the 3. One of the 3 we don't know anything about, but they have a good experience, and I'm looking for good options.
Okay, so we move so long. It's nice. So is everyone in favor of interviewing 3? Because we have 5. We have 5 on the sheet here listed. Jim just talked about 3. We don't have to have 3. We can
No, we
have,
don't.
we can have
Just
2,
my
we can
idea.
have 4, we can have 3.
What do
but
you guys
I'm
wanna do?
trying to move this along. So is everyone, let's just talk about 3. Let's talk about 3. Everyone in favor of 3? 3?
Is ISB one of the 3?
Well, we're going to get
That's the
there.
next step. Yes.
Next
3.
question. All right, so we're on agreement 3. Okay, moving it forward. Perfect. Okay, now we got to figure out our 3. So, School Connect, which is Don White, and Cohen, IASB, BWP, we've never used, but they are
Thank you for the ad, Bill.
Don White's firm, Educational Leadership Solutions. I think that's the name of it. Is that the name? Okay. And then HYA. So, thoughts on 3? No, it's 9:30, so maybe, I don't know, how do we,
If I can interject real quickly, I have never had experience with Hazard Young Edda and Associates, which is HYA. HYA does a lot from what I have seen. I believe they do a lot of big school districts. Terry, I don't know if you can confirm that, but if you see like City of Chicago, Miami, Pittsburgh, HYA usually has those big ones, or BWP is usually pretty big too. So if BWP, and I can't tell you whether or not BWP is expensive, if they're expensive, I would have to think HYA is also a top tier firm that does a lot of national searches. Terry, am I off on that? Are you aware?
I am. I actually interviewed with them once, and it was for a bigger school district. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So just
I agree.
that's just an FYI.
No,
That's
that's
all I
fine, 'cause
got.
it was on this list, but we had no experience. So I figured, let's listen.
and that's probably why they're more expensive, is because they're bigger
I
districts.
think
and
they're a
lot more
bigger
complexity.
district kind of search firm, but that doesn't mean they're not for you. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, I think that could make it pretty easy then. If there's 5 on here, and if we rule out the 2 top ones that are much bigger districts, then it would be School Exec Connect, IASB, and then Education Leadership Solutions.
Eric,
Educational, okay?
so just a quick note, HYA, that's the one you're talking about, right? The one that we said, okay, HYA, Yorkville used HYA and the price that they paid was $12,500. So, no, and so I just want to, I don't think that seems out of, and they're a big district, so, yeah. So, just want to offer that. And they come recommended. I have a friend on the school board in Yorkville, and she loved working with them. So, just a piece of information.
That word of mouth is very important.
Yeah.
From, from having an experience with them.
All right, well, how do we want to decide on the 3? Want to have thoughts?
Well, it sounds like we got 2, and 2 people want to match paper, rock, scissors for the 3rd. It sounds like a School Exec Connect and Educational Leadership. Sounds like people want those 2. And it seems like it's kind of up in the air between the IASB and this HYA. And I really don't know anything about either one of them, other than I'd rather listen to people and make a decision from there. We can listen to 4 of them. At the end of the day, we got to have a good person or a good group that can help us find a qualified candidate.
Or we could pick 3 and interview, and then if we do not like any of those, go back to the other 2.
And I'm open to that as well.
Who do we have experience with?
School Exec Connect is who we use.
That's Don White. So School Exec Connect is who we used before.
That's who we use to find out.
Okay, so we were happy with them.
Yes.
No, I was not on the board, but I spoke during, and this isn't a personal issue with who was selected, but the process ended up where the firm selected, one shouldn't have been in the pool to begin with. And it ended up with one person to choose from. So I said that I wouldn't, when I spoke to the board a couple times, I said that the taxpayers deserve better than a choice of one. And I I would not be in favor of using that firm.
I would,
And you said
I am
same.
not in favor of that firm either.
Okay, so we got,
So,
and I would be in favor of IASB. I mean, I think. we should
Yes,
interview-
I provided a lot of information of their process. They, the person that I spoke to was, what was her title, Kelly?
She was the former state superintendent of education, Carmen,
Elia.
yes, she would be the one doing our, right, Julie?
Yes.
This HYA's website says they've served 1,600 districts. A lot of districts. Since 1987, but that could be right. I don't know. I mean, maybe if they do 50 a year, I don't know, is that a lie? 50 years?
IASB is also the most affordable, and from what they've said is if superintendents are searching for a job, they put their name in everywhere. So I think we at least have them in the mix, as well as Don Whitesburg.
and we could always ask them to sharpen their pencil.
Well, if Yorkville recently, they just did the search, right? I mean, Steve, do you know the timing of
I'm not
Yorkville?
positive.
It was like within the past couple years, and the recommendation comes from a board member that was involved in that process. So I mean, it's recent information.
I'm sorry, that's HYA.
Yes, and
I'm on the website right now. I'm trying to figure out. if
Yeah.
it's a referral from them or not.
so it sounds like Don White's firm, IASB, and maybe HYA is our third, if we start there. But I would be a proponent of definitely having a special meeting. And the question for you, Steve, is could we post the job now in the process of, just to let people know the opening is there?
Sure, yeah, you can post it on IASA Job Bank. Yeah, absolutely. Not that you can't, but, a person who wants to apply to it needs some sort of contacting information to start that process, because they're going to see it and say, well, who do I contact? Because you do not want them contacting individual board members. That's not appropriate. So if you don't have a contacting point, I think that's difficult. I think if you can get this with a special board meeting wrapped up within the next couple of weeks, you're fine. You're fine.
They do have, this HYA does have Yorkville on there.
Yeah, they used them
Website.
just this spring in February. I'm looking right at it.
But they also got some pretty big ones too, like Yonkers and.
Yeah.
That's like New Jersey, I think, isn't it?
I'm sure all the firms,
Well,
IASB will help us gather the data we need and get out to our public, and give us the support and delivery to all stakeholders. But I just think one thing that's very important for our district is that maybe not going with a first-year superintendent and find someone who's a little more experienced and willing to stay.
Well,
So it's a priority of our search.
All right,
And there's a
so
whole
we're all in
process.
agreement. IASB, Educational Leadership Solutions, and HYA.
Yes.
Okay. Good. I will work on contacting them. Get availability for those three. Okay. Anything else on superintendent search?
Should we talk about the schedule for the special board meeting?
Well, I think it depends on their availability.
Okay, so that's
I mean,
via
I can
email.
figure out how quickly that can be available for us, and I can toss out potential options.
Eric, do you want me to reach out to Carmen for you?
Sure.
Okay.
See what their availability is in the
Sounds
next, say, month, 4 weeks, or
yeah.
2 weeks, 3
course.
weeks, 4 weeks. All right, I guess I'm down to HYA. All right.
All right.
All right. Whew. Teamwork makes the dream work. Okay, anything else on superintendent search? No? Okay, moving on. Public engagement.
All right. I know this always seems to happen when I want to talk about this issue, but I had forwarded a memo back in April. I've talked about it previous to that. Dr. Natalie, when she was here helping us as a board, really pointed out some of the tasks that are incumbent upon us to fulfill. And one of them that she stressed was two-way communications with the community. So I did some research, put out bullet point memo on some ideas. We briefly talked about it, but I'd like to give this new school year starting, I'd like to give some direction of what we can have our parents and families, community look forward to have that two-way communication. So can we plan on having an open house, or, I'm just looking for more feedback. Like I said, I did a lot of research. I came up with 7 ideas that have worked in other districts. But, I think this is something that we as elected officials committed to doing. And I'd like to do better in this, and I'd like to have some feedback on that.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but your experience with public engagement, what's worked good, what's worked bad, and 13 years of.
Well, it is an absolutely moving target because, I've tried to do things with public engagement in my previous role as a superintendent, with bringing parents in for kind of public service announcement messaging for internet safety, for fentanyl awareness. Those are 2 that are just jumping out at me right now. And literally, you will go through the motions of, a touchstone topic like you think of social media awareness and safety. And I've done those programs with the Will County Attorney General's office, State's Attorney's office. And I literally had one person show up to those kinds of things. And you literally have someone from the Will County State's Attorney's office there. And, I'm not saying that you don't try. I'm saying that you have to find the right formula of what people are interested in. And that's a moving target. You have open houses. You are going to get large percentages of your parents to come in, especially at this building and at MIS. That's going to decrease a little bit at the junior high. So I guess my question is if you know that that's when you're going to get your parents here, what is it that you as a board, what other message do you want to get out? Is there something that you want to be there for to get that information out? Because I guarantee you the people are going to be there for those things. But, when you're asking people to come in for community engagement at other nights of the year, everybody's just swamped. Everybody is swamped with going to this and to that. So when you're going to get people. You're going to get people at those events. You're going to get people at band concerts. You're going to get people at holiday concerts. You are going to get people at sporting events. So if those are the times people are going to be there, what is it that you want to do at those events to get information to people, to get information in front of people? Because that's when they're going to be there. You can't guarantee that if we put on this special event that people are going to show up to it on October 2nd at 7 p.m. because you're competing with everything else that's out there in the world. But when you don't have to compete with that, and you know you have events that don't compete with that, what do you want to showcase at those events? That's my suggestion.
So just a quick response to that. One of the suggestions that was given to us was in utilizing those events,
Those
like
events,
you said,
yeah.
that's a fantastic idea, you know, but was partnering board members to, at different tables, to have people come up and share their thoughts on the strategic plan. So they said, you know, these two board members will bring forth information on this, and folks can give them their, you know, information. That was part of what a suggestion was.
Sure. And that's why, Julie, is that the public they have the date and time of every time they can come here for community engagement to give their comments or concerns or questions about, you know, the strategic plan. But I think, as you're kind of saying, maybe it might not be a bad idea if board members are interested in doing that, to hit those highlight events, to say, you know, we're here because we know a lot of parents are going to be here at one time, and it's convenient for you now, so here we are. And I think that's, you know, and that was kind of the purpose of saying what I said.
Right.
So.
In getting that two-way.
Mhm.
That's what she stressed, was
Yeah,
two-way.
yeah.
So, you know, if folks think we're doing well on that, there was just really no feedback other than Jim and Eric had mentioned utilizing the village's newsletter.
Website and newsletter and stuff, yeah.
To give information.
Yeah.
So it's another one way. It's a good way, but it's another one way. So,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
The district has tried for a long time to do the coffee in the
Yeah.
morning. It's hard for the parents. In the beginning, a couple parents would show up. I know Mr. McAfee had done yours a couple times, and superintendents were trying to do the coffees too for the superintendent. And it's just a couple here or there, maybe more another time. One time, we had James Glasgow
Oh, okay.
in the
Nice.
evening to talk about internet safety.
Yeah.
And that was a great turnout.
Excellent.
You know?
Good.
So, I don't know. It's hard to gauge where
Yeah,
parents
and-
can come in and
yeah.
can't do that.
And I think, you know, one of the things, coming from a unit district, one of the things that we did was at a football game one time, we brought the In Plain Sight van from Will County, which is a representative of like a kid's room. And it kind of shows parents the places where kids might use to store or hide drugs and things like that. But we did that at a football game. So it's not, you know, you don't say, we're going to do this tonight, please come and see us, because people are too torn between other different things. But you know everybody's going to be there on football night. So you give them something else that they can do at that kind of an event. So.
I love that idea. Julie, so here would be a potential. Is could we, as 7 board members, say each one of us will attend an event at each one of our schools this school year, and just be present and be accessible to our, you know, parents, community members, and maybe we do establish a topic of the night, or kind of give a you know, you don't want like just an open, how are you ever going to accomplish, you know, talk about, you know, a topic to kind of hone in on a conversation. But I would absolutely be willing to, like, maybe if we could develop a calendar or something, so we alternate and we are accessible and we get, you know, we have that interaction with these parents and they know who we are and they can talk to us. I think it would go a long way, and I'm 100% willing, so.
To that point, I suggested the village thing because it was free to all our residents, and it goes to everybody, whether they have a kid in this district or not, and they want to know what's going on. It's a quick win. As far as going to these events, I'm not there to talk about policy. I'm there just to listen. If people want to come up and talk to us, we have these meetings every month, and we're out and about. They don't want to talk about, you know, plan this and mission that. They just want to talk to you about something that's important to them and try to get some clarity on how to deal with it. I think being open and approachable and trying to be a good listener makes a world of difference. They're not going to show up to listen to me talk about fentanyl, and I don't want to talk about that. There's other people that know that far better than I do. But when I come in here for the book fair in the beginning of the year and other places, the joke is Jim's going to be talking to somebody for a while, whether it's just listening or I'm trying to help them, or they want to do whatever it is. That's part of our mission. So, you know, you're right. No one's going to show up because the school board's hosting an event on Tuesday. We got baseball and football and every other practice you can think of. But just trying to be good members of the community and listen to be a good asset to them, I think that makes a world of difference. But that's my 2 cents.
I mean, I guess to that point, I mean, I'm not opposed to the calendar of events, but like what would an event be, right? I mean, if it's like a band concert, I don't think any parent's going to want to show up for a band concert. Like, oh, by the way, Johnny played great, or Susie did great last night, you know, with the recorder. But I want to point you to the side and talk policy, right, or government. I just don't. Yeah, like, hey, look at that. I see a board member over there. I'm going to, you know, I think they're going to come to here, right? I mean, we clearly hear, you know, public comment month after month after month. Enrichment, advanced learning. I mean, you know, same people we see all the time. Great, we love you guys. But but it's pretty clear that we have, like, you know, these themes, right? And I think we have these. And the feedback that I've gotten is just the opposite. It's, oh my God, I got another survey for this from the MES, and I got a survey from MIS, and I got multiple kids in every, you know, all 3 schools, and I'm getting all this surveys, and they're just overwhelmed. And I just don't know. I mean, last time we talked about this was April 17th. I looked back at the minutes. That's when we suggested everything. Julie, you had some suggestions. Kelly did. Jim and I did. I'm aware of 1 email since that time of people reaching out about, you know, potential public engagement stuff. 1 email since April 17th. So I just don't know how much of a priority this is right now when we have monthly meetings to this point, right? We have our emails out there. Anyone can email us if you have a question. We're not, I mean, it's not like we have, you know, we have hidden emails and secret emails. So I just don't, I mean, so from a parent standpoint, I mean, we can go to these events and set the calendar if you want, but I just don't know how, you know, if they're going to go to a basketball game or if they're going to go to a softball game. I just don't know if that's the right thing. A football game, maybe it's different. I don't know. We don't have football, right? We're junior high, so in elementary school. So I don't know. You know, I do think that, you know, where we're missing is non-parents, so non-stakeholders of this district that are not parents. You know, the taxpayers that, you know, have had students that are gone now, right? Grown adults and things like that. How do they know what's going on in the district? Maybe they don't care. That's fine too, but you know, their tax dollars are being spent, and I think that's where the opportunity is, not necessarily the parents, in my opinion. I think we have plenty of avenues for them to come out. So I don't know, my thoughts. I'm happy to attend events if that's where we want to go with the board, but I just don't, you know, I look at what we got on the agenda, superintendent search and bid, you know, budgets, and I don't know.
Building. Is there enough interest from trying to put something out bigger than this population? No, why is it just the water bill? It goes out to everybody. If there's enough interest in it, then maybe we can reach out to the village and see if that's even a possibility. I'm just thinking.
I know last time we shared this, you know, for some reason, I get District 161's newsletter. They think that I'm in their district somehow. I take it, I read it, and then I recycle it. But, you know, I could bring that in, and it's interesting. I mean, they have, like, they have a financial page, you know, like Dr. Shaw could have a financial page, and, you know, it's free. I mean, maybe we can go to the village and say, hey, can you put this up on the channel, and say, you know, some news releases. I mean, we have a public relations employee of the district. Why not utilize her in some of that manner to get some of this stuff out? Just a thought. So, anything else? Anything else?
I mean, if we want to do, I would be a proponent of doing a calendar. One of the things that I think has been appreciated is when our superintendent goes and is visible at different events. People like that, right? So if us as board members, we're out in the community, visible, introducing ourselves, you're right. There's not a lot of people typically that come to the meeting, and there's probably even more that have no idea who their board members are or what we do, which there's no judgment, but making that effort for all of us to go out and introduce ourselves and make ourselves accessible would show the effort, would be the effort, and listening. I agree. Listen, just listen. We don't have to have a script. Would everybody, be willing to do that? I do think we should record the meetings. Maybe we could revisit that at some point. I don't know, Lincoln, if you did that review or who came up with that quote that was before me. But yeah, I mean, I think we should try to do something.
I think his predecessor did that survey, or he did he got a study of how much it would cost to record the meeting. It wasn't cheap, but we can revisit that if we want to. So all right, so it's late. So how about this? So action items on this. How about Kelly and Julie come up with some sort of proposed calendar, highlight some events that you think are worthwhile that we would show up in public, as a board members show up to, and then we can discuss that and kind of divide and conquer that. Jim, you and I maybe can look into the village thing about how to get, the non-parents visibility. Oh, that's a good question.
That's why I'm asking. If we had a place, the village newsletter, we have a majority of people sitting at this table that are interested in pursuing it. I am, but we need a majority to take action, pursue this thing. Okay, got 2, got 3, got 4. That's the majority. That is the middle of the board, and we can explore it. And that's fine. Totally fine. What do you think? All right. Yeah, that's what everybody wants to do when I go there.
All right, and you two are going to come up with a calendar of potential events.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to go by calendar because I go to functions that I can go to. Because my calendar can work and my schedule and other things.
I don't know if you know.
Well, I'm just saying, I know.
We're all busy.
As a member of the board.
I go to a lot of stuff.
I'm just
But I'm
asking,
just-
what we're talking about, right?
Well,
As long as we don't have to commit
I'm
on a
not,
calendar,
I can't
right?
guarantee I can commit to a calendar.
And let's see
Or
what's
not.
on it.
Yes, just potential.
Right.
People can pick and choose. Everyone's got busy calendars.
Is it safe to say
Cross out.
if any of us have an idea, we can pursue with some sort of an idea to bring next month then? Not take the action on it, but bring your idea next month with the information.
Okay. Anything further on public engagement? Got our homework assignments? Okay. All right, next up, information reports, policy committee, press updates. I don't know if, well, I guess we should first have an update from the policy committee. They met on Monday, and then we can talk about the press policies. One of the two of you. Go ahead.
We had a policy meeting on Monday evening. We first ran through, well, we didn't run through them all. We noted there were 4 issues of press, which is an IASB team that puts together memos that outline changes that are required statutorily to the policies. We decided that we would put them up for first read. This is a team of professionals that this is what they do, and this is how we have done this work in the past. So we are going to take the month and then act on it next month, but take the month to review those to see if we have any questions about those. and Mr. Stein and I will be meeting just to run through those one by one and note any that have action items that should be highlighted for the board and the and admin and community. Beyond that, we looked at section 2 as the first section to go through, and if there were any changes that were requested or somebody wanted to have a discussion, we discussed those. The outcome of that was that there were no additional changes beyond the ones that were noted in the 4 press issues. So what you see in board book as far as the press outline of what those changes are, that is what the changes that we will be voting on next month. We set a next meeting. Sorry, I have grabbed my notes of what September, thank you, September 16th for the next meeting. We aren't guaranteeing this is a pencil or a placeholder because within that time period, if we don't foresee any changes in 1, 3, and 8, then we will not need to meet. And then the section after that is 7. So that is what we did in the policy where, everyone is welcome. If you can get Eric and I any suggestions or discussion topics or requested changes, I can compile those and then share them to make the meeting go smoother. So just watch for the calendar. That meeting may be canceled if there are no changes above what the press changes are. Any questions? Mr. Stein, did you have anything further? Okay.
Anything else on the policy committee? With the microphone on this time. See, we always do. Okay, moving on then to superintendent's report. Mr.
Yeah,
Stein.
thank you. I will be quick here. Opening day is coming up very quickly for our staff members. That is Monday, August 19th. The day is chock full of information. We have some presentations. Staff have meetings and we'll conduct professional development on that day. Same thing kind of happens on Tuesday, the 20th. More professional development, but that's kind of a little bit more building specific. And then we have our students back for their first day on Wednesday, August 21st. I want to thank Dr. Johnson and the building administrators. They have been meeting with new teachers these last couple of days and as well as their mentors. So we're getting all of those people acclimated to kind of the standard operating procedures here in Mokena, and those have been going very nicely. We held our annual district safety meeting back on August 5th. I want to thank the Fire Chief Sorelli, Deputy Chief Campbell, and from our police department, Chief Benton, along with officers Zarnecki and Luthane for being at that meeting to discuss and go over our safety plan and emergency procedures. We did have some recommendations for changes, and we have adopted those changes and sent those back out. August is just an absolute whirlwind of activity for all of us getting the buildings ready. And I want to thank everyone for their kindness and their professionalism and dedication in welcoming me back. And it's been nice to get reacquainted with some of my former colleagues and also getting to meet some new colleagues as well. So I look forward to this 24-25 school year. Last but not least, Dave made the wonderful announcement to me as I sat here before the meeting started that the parking lot is done on the north side of the building. I cannot thank Dave enough. He probably heard from me and Terry almost every day saying, Dave, is this thing going to be done or what? And so I know he was in very frequent communication with the contractors and making sure that they were moving as quickly as they could to get that done. They do still need to line the parking lot, and hopefully, weather permitting, that will be done by the end of this week still. So that's great. And I also want to thank Dave and Terry for moving quickly on our electrical issue that we had take place at MIS. What was that, Sunday? Sunday. Saturday afternoon when the power line got cut accidentally. So hopefully, knock on wood, power is scheduled to be restored tomorrow afternoon, hopefully. Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for your work on that, guys.
Mr. Stein, I appreciate you welcoming Julie and I to the safety meeting, and thank you for hitting the ground running.
Sure.
Generally speaking, at this busy time of year, I was impressed with what you did at the safety meeting, and so far, yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on. Assistant Superintendent of Instruction, Dr. Johnson.
Great. So in my report, I provided some information regarding the TREES grant that we're typically awarded on an annual basis and what we plan to use those funds for. We've already talked about the advanced learner, so I don't necessarily go into that information, but about the recommendation to move forward with the task force and what that potentially would look like. I provided an update regarding new staff orientation has looked like over the past 2 days, and again, we'll have them back tomorrow. We have a wonderful group of new staff members. They have been such a pleasure to work with, to get to know, so I'm very excited to welcome them into our Mokena family. So I want to say thank you. This is a huge team effort. District administrators, mentors, our MTA, they just left. I was going to give them a shout out. They come, as well to welcome our new staff members. So it's a true team effort, and I really appreciate everyone coming to do that. In addition, I provided a little bit information, I know Mr. Stein did as well, about our 2 institute dates to welcome our teachers back next week. And I did provide a little bit of information as well as in terms of some next steps with our MTSS implementation as it relates to social emotional learning. So that talking about here at MES and MIS, the trying out the updated version of Second Step, which is the current social emotional curriculum that we use in our building. So it has been updated in 2021. We're currently using the 2011 version. So we like to see if, that would be a little bit more engaging for our students, more up to date. And then the information regarding the social emotional learning universal screener that we would like to try out at our junior high to see if we can get the most accurate data on that unique time in a child's life in terms of where they are in relation to those standards. So I also provided a little note as well from the junior high social workers and psychologists as they were actively involved in that and are really looking forward to be able to try that out this year with our students and provide feedback on that. And then to end, I like to always provide a little celebration. This is the first time since I've been here, but we do have 2 staff members that have been accepted to present at a conference together. One of our instructional coaches, Sharon Youngblood, and one of our second grade teachers, Sam Catane. They will be sharing out later this spring on some of the work that they've partnered together with at the Illinois ACD Pump Up Primary Conference in March. So they're very excited. And I'm really proud, because it takes a lot to put yourself out there, share celebrations of things that are happening in our classroom. And I just think this is a great way, as well as some of the other conferences that we'll be presenting at this year, to share the great things that are happening in our district and in our classroom. So congratulations to them.
Questions for Dr. Johnson? Okay, next up, Director of Student Services, Mrs. Bunt.
All right, so I have a few updates for you today. We have a staffing update. I have a few positions that we are still looking to fill based on resignations and needs of students. Anytime that you see a paraprofessional position that kind of opens up, it may be a resignation, but it also is ensuring that we meet the needs of individual students based on their IEPs. On the personnel report, you will see that we are recommending to the board a health service coordinator, so hoping to cross that person off our list tonight. In the next section here, you will see in your board packet a STAR classroom brochure. This is a thorough brochure. It's 3 pages long. I tried to get it down to 1, but it didn't quite get there. It gives details of what STAR is, what it stands for, so structured teaching and resources. This program does address the needs of some of our needier learners when it comes to students on the spectrum. That being said, when we are talking about professional development moving forward, curriculum assessment, we are addressing the needs of all of our learners and focusing on, yes, this classroom, but also the needs of students who are diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second with the professional development. But this 3-page document has front and back, for one, just giving a program description or a classroom description, and then frequently asked questions. So if there are any other additional questions about the classroom, I'm more than happy to answer those. My third item here is I had the pleasure of meeting with Nadine from Lincoln Way Special Recreation Association. I myself have worked in a special recreation association before, so it has a special place in my heart. This is an organization that partners with 8 member park districts to provide opportunities for recreational activities for students with special needs. That being said, Nadine and I had a wonderful conversation about ways in which Mokena can increase their participation as a district, but also as a community. We talked about having their team members attend our open houses just to make for sure that our families know about this wonderful organization and what support they can provide. We will also be working with them in the future for other potential opportunities, and I'll be sharing those out as those arise. My final line item here is professional development. So we'll have a continuation with the Illinois State University Autism Professional Learning and Universal Supports Project. I know you have heard a lot about the needs of our students in the STAR classroom, but our students diagnosed on the spectrum are not isolated to this classroom. There are students across our district in all 3 buildings that are on the spectrum that need additional supports in differentiation, de-escalation techniques regarding social emotional learning, a lot of really great resources that we're going to use the Autism Professional Learning and Universal Support as we continue throughout this school year and for years to come. They have been absolutely wonderful. We have a leadership team that will be meeting hopefully in September to talk further about the STAR classroom, but also what our students with autism need across the entire district. Any questions for me? Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
And this is probably totally my fault here for missing something.
Okay.
In your staffing update,
Yes.
you said you have added a health services coordinator, or is that the health services coordinator that is a new hire on the action item for?
On the
today?
personnel report, you'll see at the junior high, we had a resignation,
Right.
and then we were able to hire very quickly, which is very exciting, an additional person to, not an additional,
so that's
to
not
replace
another.
that. That is correct. I apologize.
Not a +1.
Yeah.
Thank you. Whew,
Yes.
I was like, wow.
It is a replacement, not an addition.
Thank you so much.
And Kelly actually asked me, health service coordinators, yes, they are school nurses, but they do a lot of other things. They help support our evaluations for special education students when we're looking at IEPs if we have medically fragile students, reviewing documents, doing hearing and vision. So they really do coordinate health for our students rather than just the title of school nurse. Absolutely.
Thank you for answering my questions. Just for clarity, this professional development by the Illinois State University's Autism Professional, that entity.
Very long name.
Yes. I think what you're saying is that professional development is not limited to only the people in special education right now, only the staff in special ed right now. Is that it's
What I'm saying is it's not isolated just to the STAR classroom. So we have students across the district that require functional behavioral assessments that turn into behavioral intervention plans as a part of their IEPs. So in November, we're looking at them to come in and train our psychologists, our social workers, our new BCBA on the best practices regarding documentation of functional behavioral assessments and ensuring that our behavioral intervention plans are of quality.
okay? So it's still within your department.
That is correct.
Okay,
Yes,
that's
it
the
is
clarity.
isolated to special ed. Now, there
Okay.
are some de-escalation techniques that, let's be honest, students who are neurotypical and general education students, they can still have moments of need for de-escalation strategies. So right now we're focusing on special education to make for sure our neediest students are receiving, the staff are receiving the professional development to support these students, but that really can go beyond that in the future if that's something that we see a need as. Absolutely.
Questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Shaw?
Thank you. So in my monthly reports, we've got some information. We have the admin and IMRF mandated report for FY25. Information for you. You'll see it tonight. It'll get posted to our website. It's statutorily required to be posted to our website. I'll also be posting the EIS report from FY24. And then tonight, the other information item is on the hazardous routes. So this is an exercise that we do every year. Here's the hazardous routes information this month. They haven't changed. And next month, the board will vote on approving those hazardous routes, notifying the ROE that they haven't changed. Oh, right. And I'd just like to take a second to say welcome to Mr. Stein at this board meeting. Yeah, right. And it has been hit the ground running, is what Kelly said, for sure. It's been a mad dash as we get ready for school, which is so much work in the summer for us. And the stress, Dave, thank you, especially the parking lot. The parking lot, yes, for here, but also got a couple members of the ESG team in here tonight that, because we're going to talk about the RFP for the fire alarm panels in case there's any questions, here to support. But you also learned a lot about the advanced learners tonight. So thank you for your patience back there. And the chiller. So we also had the chiller that they put together. So we had some really big projects this summer. The MES parking lot expansion, the MIS playground area, which also had Willowcrest Road, and MJ, the chiller. So we had some really big projects that impacted everything at those schools. And it looks like all the way down till Friday, we're going to be done. So we're going to be really close to being done. Thank you to Dave for coordinating and managing a lot of those, and to the teams that put that together and got those done. And when you look through the board pack, you see all those other projects. The front door at MES, it still needs a little polish on it. The bathroom partitions at MJ. If the sun was still up when you got here, it won't be when you leave, but the grounds look beautiful the grounds look beautiful. The landscaping, fresh mulch, spade cut. It's a beautiful campus right now. And so we had that going on. Irvin, Mr. Walker, has make sure he's met with all of his bus drivers, done all the routing. We've got our routing software and that whole process down. We had some challenges the first year. I think we were picking up Mr. Andreessen's kids in Summit Hill during that first iteration of the Traversa software. We have that. Yeah, well, we're all living and learning. We're in school. So he's done a great job with that software. Kim Sapanchik, what a great addition to our staff. Just onboarding all of our new staff members, going through all those orientations. Always very, very impressive as HR expands its scope, and she's done just wonderful things. Our action items tonight are our tentative budget, which you saw earlier. We do have the seal coating. We don't expect that seal coating and striping to be done before the school starts. We wanted to make sure that the parking lot was complete And that project was done with all of the machinery and the tools that they bring to make sure that our parking lot is actually clean and will stay clean when we do that seal coating and striping. So last month, you've seen this on there for a few times. So tonight, what we're recommending is to Rose Paving. We have the seal coating, striping, and then there's parking lot repairs. When we took a look at all of those bids, apple to apples, we wanted to make sure that we had the MIS parking lot repairs in there. And so that's why it was a little higher than last month. So we make sure that we got that parking lot repair included in that contract. We also have the RFP for the fire alarm panels. So we've talked about that. It's in the capital plan. There were some questions about the increase in the price from the beginning to the end. And so the first look at that, we had the question just to put it out there. The first iteration of that fire alarm panels was from our predecessor engineering firm. It was a look at what was going on in 2018, 2019 pricing. And then we also had some change in the code from the National Fire Protection Agency. So when that code got updated, as soon as we started looking at the fire panels, we needed to address with the new code. And when we had new code, new fire panels, and we started to get into the wiring, then all of the components needed to also be upgraded and updated. It was also 5-6 years ago, so we've got some inflationary measures to take into consideration. Think about, I was doing the transportation report, and a bus we bought 6 years ago was $74,000. A bus this year was $132,000. So we do have some definite inflationary factors when we're looking at what we're doing inside of our capital plan. So as far as like, is this something that's important? It really is. Did we start at a different number and we came at a much higher number? We did, but there were some other factors that went into that. So this is actually the third, and I'm going to say the final number that we're going to, and when we find out, when we issue that RFP and we get feedback from our subcontractors, we'll know a little more at that point in time. But we feel pretty good about the estimates that we've shared with you that we think this project's going to come in at. As far as the timing, it is our typical timing. We issue the RFP, we put the bid documents out on the street tomorrow. They're ready, they're prepped. You had a look at the advertisement. It's queued up in the newspaper to go out. Gives us 30 days till next month. By statutory, we need 10 days from the time before we accept a bid or have a bid opening that we have to notify. So we've got those requirements built into our timeline. And then this is a project for summer 25, which will feed into our FY25 budget. This number is built into our FY25 Fund 21, because obviously fire alarms are safety, and our mantra has been warm, safe, and dry. And then I put some pictures in here so you can actually see, if you haven't got a chance to go around, to take a look at the projects that have been done. And as far as reporting goes, there's a little look at our site-based accounting. So that report is due, and I showed you what it kind of looks like as far as how much we spend in each school, and that will be published on the school report card, I think, in November. That's a lot. So anyway, the financial reports, we'll get those probably on tomorrow. What you have on there are the bills for tonight. The rest of it, with this shortened time frame from last month to this month, we'll get those all put onto the website in the next day or two.
Any questions, Dr. Shaw?
Dr. Shaw, thank you for answering my questions. Perhaps you and I can sit down and talk about this fire panel upgrade, after tonight. And I'm interested to know when, so this is a significant increase from what we thought it was going to be. And so I would just question, well, what went away or what was reprioritized that went down on the list so that this goes up on the list? What was the offset to this in our budget and in our the priority in a capital improvement plan? And you don't need to answer right now. It just would be a question. And then when does that reprioritization review of the capital improvement plan happen? That's really the question. Yeah.
You want me to answer that one now? All right. So we meet every 2 weeks. So we have a capital plan. Right now we're meeting every week because we have this push to get our projects done over the summer, and we need to be constantly updated. So typically we meet every 2 weeks, and during that time, we talk about, here's what our capital plan looks like. I have that on the screen like every 2 weeks. And we're constantly saying, you know, is there something? So for example, the big project, the playground, the parking lot expansion, that wasn't in the first iteration of this capital plan, but it got put in there and things got pushed out. So every year you see it in March. So the architects come with the recommendations in March. We have like last week we kind of talked about, here's what we know is going to happen in FY25. FY25 budget is spent. We have our projects identified, that budget is spent. So we're starting to build what we're going to do in summer 25, and it's going to be paid majority out of FY26. So we're taking a look at that capital plan every 2 weeks. And so there's a couple things that we talked about, it's Wednesday, yesterday, and said we need to make space, and we need to say, do we have enough money in FY26, FY27 to pay for the projects that we know have come to the top of the heap, right? So sometimes you have a failure, or you have, we have some old unit ventilators that we know we need to replace, and those are something that got pushed back. And now it's time for them to go to the top of the list to make sure that we take care of that. And so it is a continuous conversation with the architects and the engineers to say, what are our top priorities? Where are we at in this budget? Because our working capital plan has dollars down at the bottom. We also have money that we need for our district projects. So sometimes you just see district projects, like you see that on the report I give in March, district projects, 200,000. Well, what are those? Well, okay, so we cut an electric line, and that repair is going to be to the tune of maybe 90 to 100,000. That's going to be a district project that might not have been identified as what we're going to spend that money on, but that's something that came up. And now we have money in our budget that maybe we're not going to be doing something else that we might have done on a district level, but that's going to take care of an emergency situation. So it's a constant ebb and flow inside that working document of our capital plan. Then we decide, we know that we've got about $2 million, and then in March, here's what the prioritization is for our plans for paying out of FY26. And you guys see that. Yeah.
Right.
I'm sorry, the electrical line, wasn't that the contractor is that on our dime?
It is what's that?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah. It was a private line. So it was not marked by Julie, and it was not located by our private locator. And it is our line. It is not a ComEd line. So it
I
was
think
a
this
private
remains
line.
to be seen.
Yeah.
Something we have to look into.
We potentially, I mean, the number is 90 grand, is that what I'm hearing?
90
Okay,
100, yeah.
so-
I think that's that's probably right in that number.
okay,
Yeah.
so next, so you'll keep us,
I will.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Got my attention.
Yep. It got our attention. It got our attention. Yeah. We're very fortunate to have such a supportive community, to have our Fund 21. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on. Director of Technology, Mr. Henson.
Hello, good evening, good evening. I apologize, I know this was a lot longer than you're used to for me, especially just for one item, but just to recap real quickly here. The new network equipment that we purchased in 2022 is finally installed. It's great, all the old equipment's gone, the new equipment's in. It is what it is, I had to wait over a year to actually get it. It's fantastic. I talked about some of the hurdles that we faced, including the big hurdle of the internal fibering between the server rooms. Hopefully my analogy made sense of the big traffic lane trying to all squeeze down to a fraction of one lane. But it's not all doom and gloom. I did not put it in here, but I discovered after the fact that if you think about it like this, a lot of our buildings, main server rooms, which aren't affected by that bottleneck, have a lot of the access points terminate there. So for example, MIS, they only have one satellite server room and then their main server room. So half that building is not affected by the bottleneck. Same thing with MJH. I believe most of your access points almost come down to the main server room there, so they're not affected by that squeeze. Unfortunately, here at MES, it's not the case. It is what it is, but that's not saying it's going to be slower. It's definitely going to be better than it was, speed better than it was last year. These access points are faster.
Connectivity stuff.
Yes, we added access points in every room in kindergarten and every room in first grade. So every classroom in the district should have a access point, wireless access point now in there. So that's the good news. So digging deeper into the fiber stuff, I did find some documentation about the length. I know that was one of the questions that we received yesterday, and the cost of the run. I don't have an estimate yet because it kind of just all happened all suddenly. But we did discover that the last time it was looked at, the technology server room was called the business office. So does anyone know when the business office was down where I am now?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's actually that close. Oh, okay. All right. Well, so it's at least
Mr. Stein is right here.
Yeah.
it was always a business office.
Joe Pinkel's mom used to work down
I'll have to ask him about that. But to alleviate some of the bottleneck, I do have 2 connections coming from each server room back to the main server room. I mean, it is what it is. We're going to have to, replace that generation 1 fiber cable. So any questions on that? Hopefully this technical jargon didn't confuse anybody.
Buffalo is real good.
You're welcome.
Okay, next up is principal reports. Could be me to make Mr. Lunch go first for his first time ever, but I won't do that. I'll go with Mr. McAtee.
No, excited. Don't take it away from it.
No. He's learned from Dr. Rolanitis. You want to go last because you can just say whatever they said.
Ditto. That's all you got to say. Submitted the report, so you saw, all the great things that are happening. Got all our drills going. I want to welcome our new staff. We got a great crew coming in, including a couple that we stole from MES. That we're welcoming to the MIS family. So a great new group of people coming in. Back to school night is coming up Monday and Tuesday. You all are welcome. 2 of you I know have to be there because we got your kids. But everybody's welcome 6:30 to 7:30 at my building. Go to MES earlier than that. So we'd love to see as many of you as we can. I do want to thank Dave and Terry for getting the power back up and running tomorrow. It's been a little eerie in the building. I've been in the building all week running off of hotspots and so forth. So it's weird when everything's just silent. You walk in the halls, there's no buzz of fans or anything. It's just dead quiet. So it's peaceful. But and I do want to thank our staff. We've had staff coming in every day. They've been working by flashlights. If they have windows, they can see, and so they can work in those classrooms. But others have brought flashlights and cell phones, and they've been troopers. They're coming in. They're still getting things done. They want to make sure they're ready for the kiddos when they come back next week. So congratulations and thanks to all of our staff. And that's all I got. Any questions?
Questions? Okay. Mr. Chorley?
So we met with our new staff today, and at MES we have 12 new staff members, which is huge for me. I'm not used to this. But what a great group of teachers, some veteran teachers, some brand new first year teachers. Want to thank our first grade team because
There will be 3 first-year teachers on that team, and God love them. The veteran teachers are excited. They are really excited to have fresh blood on the team and just be invigorated by their enthusiasm and their excitement to start their careers. So I just big thank you to my first grade team. So we did that today, and then just thank my office staff for as soon as they came back, they hit the ground running. Alexandria Pierick has done amazing work with Skyward and class lists and scheduling, and thank you to the parents for calling us and emailing if their children had two teachers in their accounts for whatever reason instead of 1. So just thank you to everybody for making that happen. And it's so nice to meet Mr. Stein because he's like a living legend at MES. I would hear about him all the time. Steve Stein, Steve and Chuck and Steve. I would hear about them all the time. So it's great to have him. And he walked into my office today and he's like, yep, that's still the same furniture. I'm like, yes, it is. But it's great to have you. So that's all.
Questions of Mrs. Shorley? Okay. All right. You're up.
So it's my turn to just say ditto.
If you want. Yes.
No,
That's
just
what Mike
joking.
usually did. He just say, yeah. Yes.
No, we'll be quick. Very quickly, a huge thank you to Terry and Dave. It's nice being in my office and not sweating. I'm in 85-degree weather. So it's great. I joked with Dave that it's too cold in the building now, and I wanted him to turn it off, but it was a joke. It was just a joke. The back to school fair, I'm kind of like looking off of what Mike had shared with you. We had that on Monday. It was a huge success. 2 of the board members here were part of that. So thank you for volunteering your time just to set up that time. A ton of organizations coming out to support that. Out of the 523 kids that are registered for school, about 90% of them came back to set up their lockers, get their schedules, even though they already have access to their schedules. And 7th and 8th grade have already been in the buildings. So it was just good to see faces again. To hear kids in the hallway is always a positive. So that's a huge success. Athletics, we're already going. Our seasons are already on the way, even though we haven't started school. Baseball is going. Softball is going. Cross country is going. So if you kids see kids running in the neighborhood, they're probably not being chased by anyone. They're just running because they love running. And then golf is also going right now. So we just thank our coaches for that. It's coming back before they're technically starting school. And that's hard to do sometimes when you're in the mindset of school starts on August 21st, but you're here in the beginning of August or end of July. We do have some new staff members. I'm going to blame Megan for the trickle-down effect of the staff that we had move within our school because Stacey Lavelle took a new position, which seems very suited for her, and that just made a trickle-down effect of people going into positions of their desire within our building, which was great. We do have new staff members joining us, and I was able to have breakfast with them this morning, talk about some nuts and bolts with the building, and it's just Mokena is a good place to attract really good people. I think that's what we do well, and I think that's because of the people that are already here. So Emily Ianson, Mallory Tahako, and Sarah Garrity are our new teachers within the junior high that will be joining us. So good things are going to continue to happen as we push forward for sure. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, Lincoln Way Area Special Education.
All right, so I'll keep it short and sweet at 10:30 this evening. We approved our tentative budget over there. I provided the board, everybody with the highlights of our budget and then with the comparison of projected tuition and charges. So if you have any questions, please just get back with me. If I can answer them, I will. If not, I will get the answer for you. We approved the director's goals and 13 intergovernmental agreements with 13 districts, obviously. I want to thank our staff. Well, hold on, I'm not done yet. The best news is if you see Mr. Romeo, he had a baby girl. Her name is Scotland Elizabeth Romeo. So he came back to work. He took, I think he left his paternity leave earlier than he was supposed to get back to work. So, and then also our principal over at Pioneer Grove, she had her third baby, Leo Anthony Liu. So, I'm happy thoughts. And that's it for my report for 843. But I do want to thank our staff here at Mokena, our administrators, our teachers, our staff that's working endlessly to get the schools up and running for next week, for our kids to get back into these buildings and have a great year coming to look forward to. So thank you, everybody. And Mr. Stein, we are all obviously so excited that you're here. So thank you.
Any questions for Anna? Okay, thank you very much. Board requests, we had one from Kelly. Action requests. Ready? Okay, let's do this. First one's approval of the previous minutes.
I move to approve minutes from July 17th, 2024, regular session and closed session meetings as presented.
Second by Julie. Any discussion? Call the vote.
Mr. Andreessen?
Yes.
Mrs. Briscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
Mrs. McMillan? Yes. Mrs. Ost?
Yes.
Mrs. Tunney?
Yes.
Mrs. Zelinski?
Okay, motion passed. Next up is district bills. Mrs. Tunney.
All right, Dr. Shaw and I had a phenomenal conversation as always, and everything looked par for the course. So I move to approve the monthly bills as presented.
I gotta go with the echo from over here. I give it to Lisa because it's close proximity. All right, any discussion? Please call the vote.
Mrs. Briscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
Mrs. McMillan?
Yes.
Mrs. Ost?
Yes.
Mrs. Tunney?
Yes.
Mrs. Zelinski?
Yes.
Mr. Andreessen?
Okay, motion passed. Next up is personnel.
I move to
Personnel recommendation 7, 1, 2, 4, and 5 as presented, subject to successful background check and verification of credentials if applicable.
second.
That was easy. Okay, Sam, second. Any discussion? Let's call the vote.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
Mrs. McMillan? Yes. Mrs. Ost?
Yes.
Mrs. Tunney?
Yes.
Mrs. Zelinski?
Yes.
Mr. Andreessen? Mrs. Briscoe?
Yes.
Okay, motion passed. Welcome to all those new staff officially. Approval of the FY25 tentative budget.
I move to approve the benefits FY25 budget as presented in the direct administration explained. The tentative budget will take notice of where and when the place of budget.
Second by
Not yet.
Lisa.
Not yet.
Further move to schedule the budget hearing for September 18th, 2024 at 7 p.m. in the boardroom.
Okay, any discussion? Please call the vote.
Mrs. McMillan? Yes. Mrs. Ost?
Yes.
Mrs. Tunney?
Yes.
Mrs. Zelinski?
Yes.
Mr. Andreessen?
Yes.
Mrs. Briscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
Yes. Okay, motion passed. Next up is MES, MIS, seal coating, striping, parking lot patching.
I move that the board approve the recommendation to approve the bid for seal coating, striping, and parking lot repairs for MES and MIS parking from Rose Paving LLC from Streamwood, Illinois, in the amount not to exceed $37,000.
Jim, discussion. I just have a quick point of clarification. This does not include the Metro parking lot.
Does not include Metro.
Okay, any other discussion?
And we are going with the lowest responsible and responsive bidder.
Please call the vote.
Mrs. Ost? Yes. Mrs. Tunney?
Yes.
Mrs. Zelinski?
Yes.
Mr. Andreessen?
Yes.
Mrs. Briscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
Mrs. McMillan? Yes.
Okay, motion passed. Next up's RFP for MES, MIS fire panels.
I move the board approve the recommendation to issue an RFP for MES, MIS fire alarm panel upgrades as presented.
Second by Jim. Any discussion? Please call the vote.
Mrs. Tunney?
Yes.
Mrs. Zelinski?
Yes.
Mr. Andreessen?
Yes.
Mrs. Briscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
Mrs. McMillan? Mrs. Ost?
Yes.
Okay, motion passed. Items for the September 18th meeting.
Eric, I had sent an email. I just want to let the board know that I submitted a request to listen to the closed session where I left off last time, the next block of 6-month period. I believe it was starting in September. I've spoken with Anna about it. We are coordinating our schedules. The question for the board, I don't know if right now we can do this or this would be anyway, the past decision was that the superintendent be in the room while we listen to the tapes. And so Anna and I feel it would be fine if her and I just do it ourselves and not bring in Mr. Stein for this session. Is the board agreeable to that? Is the question.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Items. Dr. Shaw's already done, so.
We'll have
We
the,
have to go for a long list.
the hazardous routes action item, and we'll have the budget hearing and request that the budget be a formal approval.
We will also have our principals presenting out on their school improvement plans for this upcoming school year as well.
Might come back for that. Smart. Okay, next steps, follow-up related items and discussion or action items. Okay, for the good of Mokena.
Right, Eric. At what point, I don't know if I'm supposed to do this when we go into closed session, but I would like to follow up on a safety item that came up at the safety meeting in our closed session today. So is that after? Okay, I'll wait.
I have a for the good of Mokena. That's all right.
Yep, start it off.
All right. So I had the pleasure of going to the new staff orientation. I wanted to say great job. Everyone looked like they were having a really good time. I'm sad I didn't get to go on the bus ride with you, and you didn't drive past my house so I could wave. But I'm sure that continued to go well. And first golf outing is tomorrow morning, so good luck to our golf team. And all of I wanted to thank all the volunteers that I saw at the awesome back to school. I just really think you guys do such a nice job with the back to school. Seeing kids excited to go to school, as one of my boys said, well, for day one, Mom, day one. So they're always looking for volunteers. PTA, MEF, music boosters, and athletic boosters did a really nice job there. So, thanks.
Else for the good Mokena? Okay. All right, we really got to shorten these up. I move that the Board of Education adjourn to closed session for purposes of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to local government wage increase. Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this act. Collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes or employees with no action after closed session, and security procedures, school building safety and security, and the use of personnel and equipment to respond to an actual threatened or reasonably potential danger to the safety of employees, students, staff, the public, or public property. Second, any discussion? Everyone followed that, right? Okay, good. All right. Please call the vote.
Mrs. Zelinski. Mr. Andreessen.
Good night.
Mrs. Briscoe. Mr. Bush.
Yes.
Mrs. McMillan. Mrs. Ost. Mrs. Tony.
Okay, thank you. Meeting adjourned. It's 10:45, 10 minutes?
Nice seeing everybody. Great,
Yes.
great start to your year.
Yeah. And you'll be home before tomorrow.